Chapter 1606. What the F***? It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. Yi Qianqian suddenly felt like a wife who had worked hard for many years had finally become a woman. When she saw Yu Lily's flushed face and happy expression, she felt an indescribable sense of relief. Finally, my daughter has grown up. Yu Lily is married and pregnant, and Yi Yuyu is living with Li Jinan. Now, I'm the only single person in that house. Oh no. Now in addition to me, there's also a son of a B***TCH psychologist. After the higher-ups had finished speaking, it was Oming's turn. When he was done, he handed the microphone to Yu Lily. Yu Lily looked at Yi Qianqian and asked with a smile, "Everyone knows me, right?" The colleagues who had worked with Yu Lily in the past all felt a sense of closeness and affection. When they heard Yu Lily's words, many of them laughed and replied in unison, "We do." "That's great." Yu Lily's eyes turned into crescents as she smiled and said, "I'll give everyone a bonus this month." Everyone laughed in unison and cheered, "Hooray!" From the beginning to the end, Yu Lily had only said 2 sentences, but the response was the greatest. Oming smiled and held her in his ear as he whispered, "You can do that? You're amazing, my wife." "You flatter me." Yu Lily smiled and said, "I'm going to look for Qianqian. Let go of me." Together. Oming didn't think there was anything wrong with that. He put his hand on her waist and looked at her slightly bulging belly. He was in a good mood. Yi Qianqian watched as they walked toward her in pairs. She shook her head and said, "So you're all here to show off your love to me?" "Of course not." Oming replied in a good mood. His pair of peach blossom eyes shone with happiness and seriousness as he said, "Are we such shallow people in your eyes? We're clearly here to show off our child." Yi Qianqian was speechless. Yu Lily laughed out loud and said, "Don't believe him. The child is still so young. What's there to show off?" All right. Your existence is a form of harm to me. You're bullying a single person." Oming glanced at her and asked, "Still no movement." "What movement?" "Not even a fart." Yi Qianqian looked aggrieved. "I'm already so old. Why can't you give me a man? Do you want me to spend the rest of my life alone? When the time comes, I'll be able to find a partner. What's the rush?" Oming said calmly, "It's too noisy here. Let's go somewhere quiet." "What's there to change? This year's annual meeting has just started. I haven't drawn anything in the past few years. I must try my luck this time." Yi Qianqian reached out and pulled Yu Lily along. "There are too many people here. Let's go somewhere less crowded." As he spoke, he pulled Yu Lily to a corner and stared at the screen. Everyone had a share in the lucky draw. There weren't too many people in the company, so it would take some time for them to take turns to touch the balls. Yi Qianqian was envious when she saw the other people coming down with big prizes in their arms. Chapter 1607. That's the second prize. Is that all you've got? Yu Lily nudged her. Isn't the first prize great? That's $200,000. You'll still have to spend your own money on the trip. Can't you be more ambitious? It's not the same. I'm so unlucky. I'd be lucky to get the second prize. Yi Qianqian said matter-of-factly. What's so bad about the trip? You'll get a paid vacation if you get the first prize. The company will pay for the plane tickets and accommodation. That's a lot of money. Besides, going to Venice is a kind of nostalgia. Nostalgia? Yu Lily laughed. So what if it's feelings? With your stupid luck, it'd be a miracle if you got the first prize. F***CK. Yi Qianqian suddenly exclaimed. The first prize has been won. Ah, what kind of luck is this? I actually got money. 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 Yu Lily said. Didn't you say you didn't want money? Bah. Who doesn't want money? It's $200,000. $200,000. You can buy a toilet in Kingstown with that. I sob. Yi Qianqian hugged Yu Lily and wailed. I was just saying, if I get the first prize, I wouldn't mind at all. Yu Lily laughed and said, It's your turn. Hurry up. Yi Qianqian immediately straightened up, turned around, and ran toward the stage. In a few steps, she was already on the stage. Yi Qianqian was very popular in the company. The MC had a good relationship with Yi Qianqian. Seeing her serious expression, the MC handed the microphone to her and said, Miss Yi, there's still a second prize. a paid vacation for 5 days and 6 nights in Venice. There's also a third prize, a laptop worth $18,888. Yi Qianqian was very excited and said, I want the second prize. The people around her began to jeer and sigh. The MC also laughed and said, I'd like to support you, but given your luck in the past few years, I think you might be able to win a porcelain doll. The crowd roared with laughter. Someone said, The porcelain doll welcomes you. Yi Qianqian has never won a prize before, let alone this year. However, you'll definitely get a consolation prize. Don't be discouraged. Yi Qianqian was enraged by his laughter. She shouted fiercely, Shut up. With that, she decided to ignore them. She reached into the box and deliberately stirred it with her hand. When the MC saw how serious Yi Qianqian was, he looked down and said with a straight face, Yi Qianqian is about to show off. Everyone listen to what she has to say. Yi Qianqian rolled her eyes at him. She looked at the microphone in front of her and shouted, Balala Energy, second prize change. As he spoke, he reached out his hand and took out a ball. The people around her laughed so hard that a large number of them collapsed. Yi Qianqian handed the ball to the MC, who quickly took it from her. Looking at the audience, the host said with a serious expression, Although I already know the result, seeing how serious Qianqian is, I can't bear to expose her. He twisted the ball open and took out the paper inside. The host teased. Just as he was about to say something, his eyes suddenly widened. The host spread out the piece of paper and looked it up and down several times before saying with certainty, Congratulations, Yi Qianqian. A consolation prize? Someone said. Chapter 1608. Yi Qianqian was initially annoyed at being laughed at, but she was already prepared to receive a consolation prize. But when he heard the host say second prize, he immediately became alert. Yi Qianqian reached out and snatched the piece of paper. When she saw the words on it, she screamed, Oh my God! The surrounding people started to sigh. What? Is that for real? Ha 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 ha. After so many years, are you finally going to win? To be honest, I've never seen such bad luck. Sho, don't expose people when they're in a difficult situation. When Yi Qianqian saw the piece of paper, she was wild with joy. She laughed out loud and exclaimed, Oh my God! I got it! I got it! I finally got it! Wahahaha! The host looked gratified and teased, Wow, you finally won! Who is it? The crowd roared with laughter. Yi Qianqian snapped, Go away! Don't cause trouble! The host came forward and said, 5 days and 6 nights in Venice. Isn't it inappropriate for a single dog like you to go? Why don't you bring me along? Me. I'm going too. Wait for me. Yi Qianqian, don't forget about Xia Yuha by Daming Lake. Yi Qianqian wore a look of disdain when she heard that. But when he saw those words, he was very proud of himself. He put his hands on his waist and laughed. No, I won't take anyone with me. I want to travel the world by myself. As he spoke, he took the host's microphone and said, Who's next? There's still a laptop. Come quickly. After saying that, he stuffed the microphone back and ran down the stairs. When Lily saw her running down happily, she smiled and said, Your luck must have been accumulated over the past few years, and you've been saving it for this one surprise, haven't you? Ha ha ha. Yi Qianqian was overjoyed and replied, That's right. That's exactly what I was thinking. F***ck. It's next month. We only have less than 20 days to prepare. I'm so nervous. What should I do? Just as Lily was about to say something to comfort her, Yi Qianqian stared at the piece of paper and laughed strangely. She shouted, Wahahaha. I'm going to Venice. Lily. Oming smiled and said, Let's go for supper. Oh now. Yi Qianqian perked up and said, Wait for me. I'll go and exchange this ticket first. Lily watched as Yi Qianqian ran away and asked, Are the tickets for the lucky draw for 2 people? Yi Qianqian asked. Oming glanced at her and said, Yes. Wouldn't it be a waste to go alone? Lily looked at him and shook her head. What a pity. He's a single dog. When Yi Qianqian came over and heard what Lily had said, she immediately shouted in an exaggerated manner, How dare you speak ill of me? However, He did not mind and carefully placed the ticket back into his bag. He leaned forward and asked in a low voice, "Could it be that you deliberately arranged this for me? Don't think too much about it. I'm not that free." Lily's face was full of disdain. "If I were the one who arranged it, I would definitely get a single person." When Yi Qianqian heard that, she was relieved and said, "It's fine. I can go alone. I've always wanted to carry a backpack and go on a vacation. But I don't have a choice. I don't have the money. Humph. Now that luck has come, no one can stop it. Ha ha ha. Dash." Chapter 1609. Hey, don't show off too much. Be careful that you don't sprain your waist. Lily touched her waist and said, "You've gotten fatter." Yi Qianqian immediately hugged her belly and said, "Go to hell. You're the one who's fatter. This is called sexy. You've gotten fatter." Lily insisted. Yi Qianqian laughed and rolled her eyes. "I'm not going to argue with a pregnant woman." She then asked, "What are we having for supper?" "Let's go. You'll know when we get there." Lily took her hand and quickly walked out of the hotel. Oming sat in the front seat, and Lily and Yi Qianqian sat in the back. The driver drove steadily, and they soon arrived at the place to eat. It was a restaurant that looked like it was decorated very well. If it were Yi Qianqian, she would probably never come to such a place in her life. One look, and you could tell it was expensive. But since she was following Oming and Lily, Yi Qianqian didn't stand on ceremony. After entering, she casually ordered something and handed it over to Lily. The three of them ate quickly. Lily and Yi Qianqian hadn't seen each other for a while, so they chatted and talked a lot. Yi Qianqian liked to drink a little, especially when she was happy. Lily was pregnant and couldn't drink, so Yi Qianqian could only have a few drinks with Oming. They ordered flower wine with a low alcohol content. Yi Qianqian only drank a few glasses. Her cheeks were slightly red, and she looked very well. It was a little late, and Lily began to feel sleepy. Yi Qianqian had no choice but to go home. The couple sent Yi Qianqian back to her apartment and slowly drove away. Yi Qianqian was dressed more formally that day. When the security guard saw Yi Qianqian, he was stunned and said, "Miss Yi, you look really good today." Yi Qianqian felt a little proud when she heard that. As she touched her keys, she said, "Which day don't I look good?" The security guard laughed, but he didn't dare to laugh too obviously. He said hypocritically, "Yes, you look good every day." Yi Qianqian stared at him and said, "What do you mean? You're so hypocritical. You won't have any friends if you act like this." The security guard laughed and quickly helped her press the elevator button. "Hurry up. Your boyfriend is already back. He's probably waiting anxiously." "Bah!" Yi Qianqian's face was full of disdain as she said, "He's not my boyfriend." The security guard obviously didn't believe it and asked, "Quarrel?" "Shut up." Yi Qianqian got into the elevator. "That's it. Goodbye." As the elevator doors slowly closed, Yi Qianqian felt even more displeased. Boyfriend? When did Shenjilia become her boyfriend? Pooh. However, on second thought, they were right to think so. After all, a man and a woman living together, even if they were relatives, they wouldn't be so harmonious, right? Holy shit. So there was a reason why she had been single for so many years. With such a big man here, no peach blossoms would be able to enter. In this way, how was she going to get out of singlehood? No way. She couldn't let things go on like this. She had to chase him away. As Yi Qianqian was lost in thought, the elevator arrived. Yi Qianqian walked down the stairs and had just stuck the key in when the door opened from the inside. Shenjulia's hair was half dry. When he saw her flushed cheeks, he frowned and sniffed. "Have you been drinking?" For some reason, Yi Qianqian felt a little guilty and quickly said, "I." However, she quickly realized what was going on. She could do whatever she wanted. What did he have to do with her? She angrily put her hands on her hips and said, "Yeah, what's wrong?" Shenjilia didn't look too happy. He reached out to take her bag and asked, "Who are you with?" Add 10 chapters. Unbelievable. Haha. Thanks for the monthly votes. Chapter 1610. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she immediately straightened her back and said, Why do you care who I go out with? Humph. As she spoke, she reached out to push Shinjilia away and yelled, Get out of my way! Block the way! Shinjilia could smell the alcohol on her. He frowned deeply and said, You look so guilty. Did you go out with a man? You're dressed so nicely. Did you go on a date? When Yi Qianqian heard that, she felt a little smug. She turned around and looked at Shinjilia. What's wrong with you today? Why are your eyes so sharp? When Shinjilia heard that, he sneered and looked away. He hung her bag up and said, You think you're flying off the handle just because I complimented you? Hey, what's this? As Shinjilia spoke, he reached his hand into the gap of her bag. Yi Qianqian's bag wasn't closed, and the ticket for a 5-day and 6-night trip to Venice was exposed. When Yi Qianqian saw Shinjilia reaching for it, she was shocked and immediately stopped him. Stop! What are you doing? But it was too late by the time she spoke. Shinjilia pulled on the corner of her bag that was exposed, and the ticket was exposed to the air. Venice! Yi Qianqian was nervous. She rushed forward to snatch it back and yelled, Give it back to me! However, Shinjilia quickly moved his hand away. Using his height advantage, he raised his hand high and looked at the words on it. Eurasian Comics Anniversary Second Prize. Shinjilia read the words on it, and suddenly understood. Oh, I was wondering why you were so grand today. So it's the company's anniversary celebration. Yi Qianqian exploded in anger and said, Give it back to me, you stupid idiot. Shinjilia was used to being scolded, so he pretended not to hear her and said, Ha ha ha. I knew a woman like you wouldn't be able to get a date with a man. It's too difficult for someone like you to be single. Ha 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 ha. His unrestrained mockery made Yi Qianqian angry. Yi Qianqian wasn't tall. She was the typical height of a southern girl. At that moment, when she saw Shinjilia's annoying smile, she immediately jumped up. When Shinjilia saw that, he immediately dodged. But it was too late. Yi Qianqian kicked his knee hard. Shinjilia lost his balance and fell backward. She sat down on the sofa in shock. Yi Qianqian took the opportunity to take the ticket back and turned to leave. She glared at Shinjilia with a huff and raised her foot to kick him. What a foul mouth you have. Serves you right for being single. Pooh. With that, he turned around and left. When Shinjilia saw how angry Yi Qianqian was, he laughed. He felt a little helpless and a little embarrassed. He muttered, Don't tell me he's really angry? Yi Qianqian didn't know if she heard it or not, but when she returned to her room, she deliberately slammed the door shut. The door slammed shut with a loud bang. When Shinjilia saw this, he understood. Well, it didn't matter if she was really angry or pretending to be angry. In any case, she wasn't in a good mood. Shinjilia stood up and used a towel to dry his hair. After mulling over what he was going to say, he went forward and knocked on the door. Ahem, my dear Miss Qianqian, I left you dinner. Would you like to have some? It was quiet for 1 second, 2 seconds. Chapter 16:11. Yi Qianqian glared at him angrily. Just as Shinjilia was about to speak, Yi Qianqian suddenly said, I'm not eating. Get lost. Then the door was slammed hard. The door almost hit Shinjilia's nose. Shinjilia rubbed his nose. Fear lingered in his heart as he said, If you don't want to eat, then don't eat. Why are you so angry? Cough cough. Was what he said just now a little too much? But did I say anything wrong? Shinjilia sighed softly. With a helpless look on his face, he muttered to himself. As expected, the more loser one is, the harder it is to accept the truth. Shinjilia had done it on purpose. When Yi Qianqian heard his words, she gritted her teeth in anger. Yi Qianqian gritted her teeth. She looked at the ticket and took a deep breath. Calm down, calm down. Don't make any decisions while you're angry. After a few days, I'll have a showdown with him and chase him away. At that moment, no matter how delicious and professional Shinjilia's cooking was, it couldn't quell the rage in her heart. Yi Qianqian considered herself to be very rational. Yi Qianqian carefully put the plane ticket away. Her heart was filled with relief. She found her passport and happily went to find clothes to take a bath. Yi Qianqian took a shower and washed her hair. She realized that she had washed all the towels in the house that morning. They were hanging on the balcony outside. Her hair was wet and uncomfortable. If she didn't dry it, She wouldn't even be able to blow it. But that guy was definitely still on the sofa. If he went out now, he would definitely see him again. Forget it. It doesn't matter if I don't wipe it once in a while. But I get annoyed whenever I see that fellow. She made do with a wet towel and quickly turned on her computer. She sat in front of it and started working. Her wet hair was draped over her shoulders. The room was air-conditioned, and it was very comfortable. However, there was a price to pay for such comfort. In the middle of the night, Yi Qianqian felt sore all over. He stretched, and his whole body was steaming. He got up and prepared to go to the toilet. Just as he got off the bed, his head felt dizzy. Yi Qianqian staggered a little as she opened the door and walked out. She could clearly feel that she wasn't in a good state. As soon as he opened the door, he saw that there was not much light in the living room. The lights in the living room were not turned on, and the bright light from the TV vaguely illuminated the living room. When he heard the door open, Shenjilia turned around and asked, "You're awake?" Yi Qianqian didn't want to talk to him. She was extremely sleepy. After going to the bathroom, he sat on the toilet. As soon as he sat down, his buttocks were frozen by the toilet bowl. He reached out and touched his forehead. It seemed to be a little hot. Yi Qianqian frowned and muttered, "I can't be that unlucky." After all, she hadn't been sick for many years. Why did he suddenly have a fever? Yi Qianqian got up and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman in the mirror looked very young. There were obvious dark circles under his eyes, and now his whole face was red. Yi Qianqian turned on the tap and splashed some water on her face before quickly walking out. Shenjilia was watching a football match when Yi Qianqian snorted and said, "If you're not asleep at this hour, you might die of a heart attack." "It doesn't matter. Tomorrow is the weekend." Shenjilia yawned and suddenly turned to look at Yi Qianqian. "Yi Qianqian." Chapter 16:12. I might have gone overboard with what I said last night. I'm sorry. Yi Qianqian paused and turned to look at him. This guy is actually apologizing to me? He's actually apologizing. Yi Qianqian was very surprised. She looked at Shenjilia as if she had seen a ghost. It was rare for this guy to apologize. Although it was a little overboard, she decided to forgive him. As she was thinking about it, Shenjilia said with a serious expression, "I've thought about it for a long time. Although we're considered very close now, there are still some truths that I can't say. You don't mind, do you?" Yi Qianqian's original thoughts were instantly dashed. She glared at Shenjilia and didn't say a word. She turned around and stormed into her room. It was a little cold in the air-conditioned room. Yi Qianqian shivered and turned off the air conditioner. Her head was dizzy. Yi Qianqian hugged the blanket and fell into a deep sleep. She didn't know how long she slept. She felt a wave of discomfort wash over her. She felt nauseous. Yi Qianqian sat up and retched. She didn't vomit anything. She just felt very uncomfortable. The sky was already bright. She looked at the time. It was already past 10 in the morning. Yi Qianqian's entire body hurt. When she stood up, she felt as if her bones were about to fall apart. She felt nauseous again. Yi Qianqian didn't even bother to put on her shoes. She ran to the bathroom. Shenjilia had unknowingly fallen asleep on the sofa while watching the game. When he heard the sound of barefoot running behind him, his eyelids twitched. He quickly stretched and let out a long yawn. Ugh! The sound of Yi Qianqian vomiting drove away Shenjilia's drowsiness. Shenjilia opened his eyes suddenly and sat up. He turned his head in the direction of the bathroom and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Yi Qianqian was too busy vomiting to care about him. She threw up the dinner she had the night before. In the end, there was nothing left to vomit. All she could do was throw up a few mouthfuls of acid. Yi Qianqian was about to collapse. Her face was flushed. She hugged the toilet bowl and reached out to flush it. She was exhausted. She lay by the sink with her eyes half closed. She looked like she was about to die. Shenjilia walked over barefoot. When he saw her in such a state, he handed her a few tissues and said, "Wipe yourself." Yi Qianqian pulled it over angrily. She touched her mouth and stuffed the tissue back. Shenjilia was instantly disgusted and retorted, "Can't you have some common decency? How could you do such a thing?" Yi Qianqian rolled her eyes at him and said, "Count yourself lucky that I didn't puke on you." Shenjilia asked. Are you not feeling well? Yeah. How can I be comfortable when I'm pregnant? Yi Qianqian was in a bad mood. She waved her hand and refused to talk to him. Shenjilia tossed the tissue away. When he heard that, he suddenly burst out laughing and said, Someone like you can get pregnant. Dream on. Yi Qianqian instantly felt as if 1,000 arrows had pierced through her heart. What did he mean by that? A woman like her is the best, okay. However, she didn't have any strength left in her, so she couldn't be bothered to argue with him. Yi Qianqian slowly got up and staggered a little. When Shenjilia saw this, he stepped forward and asked with uncertainty, Is she really pregnant? Chapter 16:13. Shenjilia exclaimed exaggeratedly. He immediately reached out to touch her forehead and asked, Do you have a fever? Yi Qianqian pushed him away and said domineeringly, You're the one with a fever. Get lost. Shenjilia said, Hey, don't distort my pronunciation. I clearly said I have a fever. Yi Qianqian snorted. She didn't have the energy to argue with him. She didn't want to walk anymore. Her body was sore and weak. She simply collapsed on top of him. Yi Qianqian looked up and said, What did I do to deserve this? I'm dying of discomfort. Shenjilia looked at her with disdain and said, You're the only one who can be so energetic when you have a fever. As he spoke, he helped her out of the room and said, Put on your shoes. I'll take you to get an injection. No, I don't want an injection. Don't worry about me. Go watch your game. Yi Qianqian waved her hand and lay on the sofa. Hey, it's still warm. Shenjilia had just lain on the sofa, so of course it was warm. When Shenjilia saw her like that, he reached out to cover her with a blanket and said, The game is over. Let's go. I'll take you to get an injection. Go away. Do I need you to take me to get an injection? I can heal myself. Shenjilia sneered. Stop fooling around. I've never heard of an idiot having such a function. Yi Qianqian said, Get lost. Yi Qianqian lay on the sofa. She had no intention of getting up for an injection. Shenjilia touched his head and thought for a moment before saying, I'll go buy you something to reduce your fever. Let's check your temperature first. Do you have a thermometer? No. Yi Qianqian said matter-of-factly. What about flu medicine? No. Yi Qianqian didn't look the least bit remorseful. She said, I've never fallen sick. These things are useless to me. Shameless. Then why do you have a fever now? You're the one with a fever. You're misdiagnosing me. Yi Qianqian was in high spirits. She got up and said, I'm hungry. Shenjilia asked, What do you want to eat? Braised pork ribs, spicy chicken, yuxiang shredded pork. As Yi Qianqian spoke, she found the food tasteless. Do you have sugar? No. Shenjilia repeated Yi Qianqian's words and denied it flatly. Yi Qianqian had a look of disdain on her face as she said, You good for nothing. You don't even have candy. What use are you? Shenjilia replied, Come on, big sister. Don't do it anymore. I'll take you to the doctor, okay? Not good, get lost. Yi Qianqian was annoyed. Why don't you just go and buy me medicine? Why do you have to talk so much nonsense? How can you take medicine so casually? You're already burning up like this, and you don't even have a thermometer. How am I supposed to buy it? Shenjilia was defeated by her, and he asked kindly, Do you want to wear those shoes? Yi Qianqian ignored him. She closed her eyes and fell asleep on the sofa. Shenjilia was on the verge of breaking down. He twisted his hands and gestured at her neck. He really wanted to strangle her to death. This woman was too annoying. In the end, Shenjilia didn't lay his hands on her. Instead, he went to the shoe cabinet and found a pair of shoes that were easier for her to wear. Yi Qianqian had already fallen asleep. When she felt him grab her foot, she immediately kicked it off and turned over to continue sleeping. Shenjilia held her ankle firmly and said in a low voice, Behave yourself. Yi Qianqian frowned and kicked it off again. She asked, What are you doing? Shenjilia didn't say anything. After he put the shoes on her, he lifted her up. Chapter 16:14. Yi Qianqian was caught off guard and jumped in fright. She opened her eyes and exclaimed, F***ck. Shenjilia, you've gone mad. Shenjilia didn't say a word. He opened the door and walked out. Yi Qianqian couldn't struggle at all. She was on the verge of tears and said, "Big brother, put me down. I'll walk on my own. Can't you wait for me to get changed?" Shenjilia glanced at her and said in annoyance, "Wouldn't it have been over if you had done this earlier?" Yi Qianqian was finally put down. She immediately scrambled inside. Shenjilia looked at her back and snorted, "You're quite spirited. TSK, you really have the constitution of a cockroach." About 10 minutes later, there was still no movement from Yi Qianqian. Shenjilia waited outside and felt that something was wrong. He asked, "What are you doing inside?" There was no reply from inside. Shenjilia stood up from the sofa and knocked on the door. "Yi Qianqian." The sound of footsteps came from inside. Yi Qianqian had just opened the door when Shenjilia felt a gust of hot air hitting him in the face. Yi Qianqian's cheeks were flushed. It was obvious that she was in a bad state. She had changed into a set of simple and light sportswear. It was short-sleeved and looked very thin. Her shoes were half covered, and her eyes were half closed. When Shenjilia saw Yi Qianqian's state, he reached out and touched her forehead. It was frighteningly hot. This was at least a high fever. There was no way he was fooling around. Shenjilia frowned and said, "Let's go. Your IQ isn't high to begin with. Don't let the fever turn you into an idiot again. Otherwise, you'll never be able to get married." F***ck Shenjilia. Can't you watch your mouth? Yi Qianqian pushed him and said, "It's rare to see a girl as smart as me." Shenjilia looked at her in disdain and said, "You? Smart?" Yi Qianqian was indignant. She put her hands on her hips, but before she could say anything, she was pulled by Shenjilia. Shenjilia dashed into her room. When Yi Qianqian saw that, she panicked and asked, "What are you doing?" Without a word, Shenjilia opened the closet and took out a thin coat from Yi Qianqian. He put it on Yi Qianqian and said, "It's windy outside today. Put on some clothes. Let's go." Yi Qianqian swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. With her arm held by Shenjilia, she felt her eyelids grow heavy. She didn't have much strength left in her, so she didn't want to walk anymore. He half squatted on the ground and said weakly, "I feel like vomiting." Shenjilia glanced at her and said, "Go ahead and throw up first. You can leave after you're done." "I can't spit it out." "Then let's go." Shenjilia walked up and lifted Yi Qianqian in his arms. "Take a nap. We'll be there soon." His sudden action made Yi Qianqian's heart skip a beat. Shenjilia was a man who loved cleanliness. He always had a faint scent on him. This smell was different from perfume, and it was also different from the smell of other men. It was an indescribable scent. It smelled good and made her feel very comfortable. Yi Qianqian didn't know that Shenjilia was so strong. It seemed effortless for him to carry her. Yi Qianqian's body was getting hotter and hotter, and her vision was getting blurry, but her eyes were fixed on Shenjilia. Chapter 16-15. Yi Qianqian was speechless. Sure enough, everything beautiful was just an illusion. Yi Qianqian wore a look of disdain when she heard that. Soon he closed his eyes and breathed evenly. After Shenjilia said that, he didn't dare to look down. The elevator had just reached the first floor, and Yi Qianqian had already fallen asleep. Shenjilia was amused and disappointed at the same time. Shenjilia didn't know what kind of complicated emotions he was feeling. As he held her, he felt that the woman in his arms was incredibly light. He weighed it and estimated that it was less than 50 kilograms. As the saying goes, those who weigh less than 100 pounds are either flat-chested or short. This Yi Qianqian, he glanced at her chest. It was a tragic sight. He imagined her height again. She seemed to only reach his chin. This was too tragic. Flat-chested and short. In the future, he might not even have enough milk to feed his children. Moreover, with his height, if he didn't find a taller one, he wouldn't be able to make up for the height of his descendants. Shenjilia suddenly began to sympathize with Yi Qianqian's future husband. He shook his head and muttered, "Life's greatest tragedy." Yi Qianqian didn't know if she heard it, but her body wriggled a little, but she quickly fell asleep again. Shenjilia glanced at her indifferently and didn't seem to mind. He carried her to the side of the road and waited for an empty car. A taxi soon arrived. Shenjilia got into the car and threw Yi Chanqian into the back seat. He went up and let her head rest on his knees. "Master, let's go to the hospital." The driver took a look and asked, "Outpatient department?" "Yes." Then the driver slowly drove away. Yi Chanqian was sleeping soundly on Shenjilia's lap. The more he rubbed his head against the wall, the hotter his body became. Yi Chanqian could clearly feel that her body was burning terribly, and it was getting colder and colder. Shenjilia looked at her and said, "Sir, please turn off the air conditioner. She's running a fever." The driver took a look and switched off the air conditioner. "Aren't you hot? You're sweating." Shenjilia was indeed feeling hot. He glanced at the time and saw that it was already noon, the time when the sun was at its strongest. "It's okay. Drive faster, thank you." Yi Chanqian was oblivious to it. She hugged his waist and nuzzled her face closer and closer to him. Shenjilia shifted his body uncomfortably and reached out to cover her face to prevent her from going any further. The driver snickered and said, "Girlfriend?" "No, a friend." "Oh." The driver understood. He glanced at the rearview mirror and said with a faint smile, "Then you're really nice to your friend." There was a deeper meaning to her words. Shenjilia looked out the window and pretended not to understand. The taxi suddenly braked. Both of them, who were in the back seat, were caught off guard, and their bodies lurched forward. Shenjilia's first reaction was to cry out in surprise. He reached out and held Yi Chanqian's head to protect it. The car quickly came to a stop. The driver rolled down the window and cursed, "Are you blind? Do you want to die?" Yi Chanqian had also woken up. She turned her head to look at Shenjilia. However, when he turned his head, he suddenly realized what he was using as a pillow. Yi Chanqian was taken aback and blinked her eyes. He immediately turned around and sat up saying, "Have we arrived?" "Soon," the driver replied. "School is over at this time, so there's a little traffic jam. We'll be fine once we pass this section." Chapter 16:16. The road was soon cleared. The car sped up and arrived at the hospital in just a few minutes. Yi Chanqian found it difficult to walk, but she still slowly got out of the car. Shenjilia quickly went forward and helped her up. Yi Chanqian lowered her head slightly and said guiltily, "I can walk on my own." Shenjilia looked at her with disdain and said, "What are you doing? Walk properly. If you can't walk, just walk properly. Who's going to laugh at you?" As he spoke, he pulled Yi Chanqian into his arms and said, "I'll help you walk." Yi Chanqian felt as if the world was spinning around her as her body was being hugged tightly. She straightened her back and leaned on his shoulder, saying, "I can't walk." Shenjilia had already anticipated this. He half carried and half supported her as they walked into the hospital. Today was Saturday, so there were a lot of people. Shenjilia registered her for the emergency department and found someone he knew before putting her on an 4 drip. His fever was 39 degrees, and his face was red. After Yi Chanqian was hooked up to the 4 drip, she sprawled on the bed and fell asleep. Yi Chanqian didn't know if she was dreaming or what, but she kept going on and on. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and she was muttering something that no one knew what she was saying. Yi Chanqian wasn't the only one in the temporary ward. The commotion attracted the attention of others. Shenjilia's expression remained the same as he sat by the side and stared at the water. When it was almost empty, he asked the nurse to come in and replace it. 2 hours had passed after 3 to 4 packs of water. Yi Chanqian was in a deep sleep. It was as if she didn't know the difference between day and night. He didn't sleep soundly. Instead, it was obvious that he had been plagued by nightmares. After removing the needle, Shenjilia didn't bother shaking Yi Chanqian awake. Instead, he carried her in his arms. She weighed less than 50 kilograms, but in Shenjilia's hands, she felt as light as a feather. Yi Chanqian was shorter than Yulili, but Yulili didn't seem to be that light. As expected, there is a difference in weight between a single woman and a single woman. Shenjilia muttered to himself as he carried her down the stairs. The surroundings were noisy, and his body was suspended in the air. Yi Chanqian felt that she was about to ascend. She was in a very wonderful state. His bones were itching, and so was his heart. At the same time, there was also a sweet and warm feeling in his heart. An indescribable magical feeling filled his heart. His body felt warm and cozy. When he opened his eyes, he was on his own bed. Yi Qianqian looked around. She was exhausted. He sat up. But before he could do so, he heard a voice beside him. "You're awake." The man's voice was undoubtedly Shenjilia's. Yi Qianqian sat up straight. Surprisingly, she wasn't frightened at all. She stared at Shenjilia in a daze. After a long time, he finally replied, "Didn't we go to the hospital? Why was he at home now? You're sleeping like a pig. You wouldn't even know that you were being sold," Shenjilia said with a look of disdain. "I made some porridge. Have some." "I don't want to eat it." Yi Qianqian was a little resistant. "It's already past 3 in the afternoon. If I don't eat now, I'm going to become an immortal." Shenjilia closed the book in his hand and stood up. "Go wash your face. It's covered in saliva. It's so dirty." Yi Qianqian froze and immediately reached out to touch her face. There was really saliva. Watching him close the door, Yi Qianqian snorted. She immediately got up, put on her shoes, and hopped toward the bathroom. After a good night's sleep, Yi Qianqian felt much better. There was a tingling pain on the back of her hand. It was a sign of a drip. That meant that they had really gone to the hospital. Could it be that Shenjilia had carried her back? Chapter 16-17. Yi Qianqian brushed her teeth and washed her face. His mood was inexplicably in a mess. Strangely, it wasn't good, but it wasn't bad either. When she walked out, Shenjilia was sitting on the sofa playing with his phone. When he saw her come out, he turned off his phone and stood up. The moment Yi Qianqian saw him, she immediately thought that he was the one who had carried her back from the hospital. Her heart throbbed. Yi Qianqian didn't dare to look at him. She shifted her gaze to the dining table. There were 2 bowls on the table, and on top of them was a bowl of smoky porridge. It looked, smelled, and tasted delicious. Although Shenjilia's culinary skills weren't as good as Yulili's, there was no doubt that he was better than other men. Yi Qianqian sat down on a chair. When she saw him sit down, she asked, "You haven't eaten yet?" "I ate a little, and I'm hungry again." Shenjilia didn't stand on ceremony. He picked up a spoon and handed it to her. Then, he also picked up a spoon and slowly drank it. The porridge was very hot. Yi Qianqian was sweating profusely after eating less than half a bowl. She fanned herself with her hand and said, "It's such a hot day. Turn on the air conditioner." When she looked up, Shenjilia was also sweating profusely. When she heard that, she rejected him and said bluntly, "No. F***ck. You look very hot. Be careful not to get a heat stroke." Shenjilia looked at her with disdain and said, "Do you think everyone is like you? You must have run a fever, because the air conditioner was too low last night." Pfft. Yi Qianqian was angry and said, "If it weren't for you, would I be in this state now? Hey, can you be a little more reasonable? Why are you blaming me for everything? Did I make you catch a cold?" "Yes," Yi Qianqian said matter-of-factly. "Who asked you to criticize me last night? I left my towel and hairdryer outside. I didn't want to see you, so I didn't blow dry." Shenjilia was baffled and said, "So, you caught a cold because you didn't blow dry your hair last night?" "Nonsense," Yi Qianqian said angrily. "It was all because of you." Shenjilia was skeptical when he heard that. However, he was not convinced on the surface. He said, "You blame everything on me. You have hands and feet. What's wrong with coming out to get a towel? It's your good fortune to show me such a handsome face. Bah, whoever wants to look can look. I'm bored to death. Moreover, no, handsome," Shenjilia replied. "My heart aches that you've gone blind at such a young age." Yi Qianqian was so angry that smoke was coming out of her mouth. She retorted, "F***ck your blindness. I'm worried that your future girlfriend will be blind to fall for a guy like you." When Shenjilia saw how angry she was, he didn't care that he was being scolded. Instead, he said proudly, "It doesn't matter. If I can't find a girlfriend, I'll just find a boyfriend. Anyway, with my looks, I'm different from a blind man like you." The way Shenjilia stroked his hair and winked at her smugly made Yi Qianqian scream in anger. She put the spoon down and screamed, "I'm not eating anymore. With that, she stood up and turned around to leave. When Shen Julia saw that, he immediately reached out to hold her back and said, I cooked so much. Finish it. Chapter 16:18. Hey, I'm just kidding. Let's eat first. Shen Julia grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him. He sounded a little anxious. Yi Qianqian was indeed hungry, but she got angry when she saw Shen Julia's face. She glared at him and said, Let go. I don't want to eat anymore. Shen Julia felt a headache coming on. He had no choice but to show weakness and said, Sir, do me the honor and eat some. When Yi Qianqian saw his expression, she snorted and said, You've gone too far with your words. Yeah, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said such a big truth. Yi Qianqian became even more furious and said, You. Hey, okay. I was wrong. Hurry up and eat. Aren't you hungry? Shen Julia looked helpless and said, Don't turn on the air conditioner. Just finish eating. Take some medicine and go back to sleep. Do you think I'm a pig? Shen Julia asked. Are you going to eat or not? Yi Qianqian was indeed hungry. When she heard that, she sat down and continued eating. But the more she ate, the hotter she felt. She glanced at Shen Julia and realized that he wasn't any better. However, she was sick but he wasn't. On such a hot day he could easily get a heat stroke. Yi Qianqian felt a little bad. How could this guy be so stupid? She didn't force him to eat with her. Why did he have to torture himself on such a hot day? He made it seem like she was the one abusing a child. How was she supposed to deal with this? After thinking about it, Yi Qianqian asked, Aren't you feeling hot? Shen Julia wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, What do you think? Then turn on the air conditioner. No. I have to go back to the hospital later. Isn't it Saturday today? Do you have to work overtime? Yeah. Shen Julia finished the last mouthful of porridge and said, There's a patient who came back from abroad. I have to go over. Oh, Yi Qianqian replied. She was burning up. The appointment was supposed to be in the morning, but you weren't feeling well in the morning, so I took you to get a drip. I had to let her wait until the afternoon. It was obvious that he was here to claim credit. Yi Qianqian snorted angrily and ignored him. Shen Julia wiped his mouth and said, In that case, I'm going to the hospital. You mustn't turn on the air conditioner. When you shower, you have to take a hot bath. Remember to take your medicine. The medicine is at the head of your bed, along with some mineral water. Just take it. All right. Let's go. Yi Qianqian waved her hand impatiently. Shen Julia wasn't in a hurry. He took his time in the bathroom to take a cold shower before leaving the house refreshed. Yi Qianqian washed the dishes, wiped them clean, and placed them in the disinfecting cabinet. When she heard the sound of Shen Julia leaving the room, she had a strange feeling in her heart. Shen Julia seemed to treat her quite well. Although sometimes he was as annoying as an old mother, he still cared about her. It was just that his mouth was too cheap. She walked into the room and saw the mineral water and medicine that Shen Julia had mentioned. What are you going to do? After taking the medicine, Yi Qianqian took a shower and soon began to feel sleepy. She fell onto the bed, and suddenly she thought of something. He got up and called his sister. Yi was a little busy that day. When she received Yi Qianqian's call, she was cooking. Li Jinnan was sitting on the sofa. When he saw that it was Yi Qianqian, he called out, It's Yi Qianqian. Chapter 16:19. Soon, Li Jinnan answered the call. Yi Qianqian's voice quickly came from the other end. Hello, Yu. Li Jinnan lazily leaned back on the sofa and replied, Yu is cooking. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she heaved a sigh of relief and asked, Are you all right now? How is Shen Luoan? Shen Luoan has been locked up. He'll be in court tomorrow. Li Jinnan retracted his lazy attitude and said, From the looks of it, it's unlikely that he'll be released. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she was a little happy and said, That's great. He's a scumbag. For such a person to be locked up, it's simply too satisfying. Li Jinnan was silent when he heard that. Yes, a person like Shen Luoan was finally locked up. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion. However, this was not a consequence that Shen Luoan should have to bear. All of this was for Yi Yu. If it hadn't been for Shen Luo and Yi Yu would have been the one inside. Yi Qianqian didn't notice anything amiss with Li Jinan at all. She continued, "This man doesn't have the slightest sense of responsibility, regardless of whether it's toward our Yu, Shen Manting, or that deadbeat *tch. He doesn't have the slightest intention of taking responsibility. It's a good thing that scum is locked up. But why is he locked up?" Yi Qianqian had been in Kingstown for the past few days. She had mentioned going to the capital to help out, but Li Jinan and Yi Zhenhua had persuaded her to change her mind. Indeed, Li Jinan lived up to everyone's expectations and rescued Yi Yu. But how did Shen Luo end up being locked up for no reason? Moreover, judging from Shen Jilia's expression, he didn't seem to know either. "He turned himself in," Li Jinan said. "He told the police that he was the one who killed Guan Kui. All the evidence corroborated that. He was only taken into custody yesterday. Yu was only released yesterday as well." As Li Jinan spoke, he slowed down and said, "There will be a turn for the better." He couldn't let Shen Luo go to jail. Shen Luo had nothing to do with this incident. If Shen Luo were to suffer such injustice for nothing, even Li Jinan wouldn't feel good about it. Both he and Yi Yu owed Shen Luo a favor. What? Yi Qianqian found it a little strange. This person reaped what he sowed. He could even kill his newlywed wife. Even if there's a chance to turn things around, wouldn't he have to spend at least a few decades in prison? Li Jinan was starting to get a headache. He said, "It's not what you think it is. Shen Luo wasn't the one who killed him. Of course, it wasn't Yi Yu who killed him. It's highly likely that Guan Kui directed and acted it out herself." When Yi Qianqian heard that, she was confused again. She asked, "Guan Kui directed and acted on her own? Was she dead or not? What's in it for her?" "He died, but left behind a mess to torment those who are still alive." Li Jinan was filled with disdain, but he had to admit that Guan Kui had played her cards very well. At least, everyone was unhappy because of her. This experience would definitely be unforgettable for the rest of their lives. Yi Qianqian was at a loss for words. She sighed and said, "It's good that Yu is fine. Let me know when you're coming back to Kingstown. I'll hold a welcome party for you." "Okay. Goodbye." Li Jinan hung up the phone and looked toward the kitchen. Yu was just walking out with a bowl of soup. She had just set it down when the doorbell rang. Chapter 1620. Although it wasn't her first time meeting her future father-in-law, she was still very nervous. She hadn't had dinner the night before, so she had woken up early to prepare. She wanted to show off her skills to Li Xiao. When she saw Li Jinan open the door, Yi Yu's heart raced. She calmed herself down and looked at the door. Li Xiao hadn't come alone. He had a handsome young man with him. Li Jianqian walked in. When he saw Li Jinan, he called out happily, "Uncle." Li Jinan waved at him and said, "You've grown taller again. Are you happy in the capital?" Li Jianqian nodded his head and replied, "Yeah, Grandpa and Grandma are very good to me. My neighbor's brother always teaches me many things. You'll get used to it. Here, do you know this person?" Li Jinan turned around and pointed at Yi Yu. Li Jianqian immediately called out, "Auntie." If Yi Yu had been called out to previously, she would have mumbled her response. But with Li Xiao in front of her, Yi Yu didn't dare respond. If she responded now, wouldn't it seem like she was being overly sentimental? She instinctively looked at Li Jinan. The latter raised his eyebrows and said, "The child is calling you." Yi Yu laughed dryly and didn't dare respond. She waved her hand and said, "Come wash your hands and let's eat. Uncle, it's time to eat." Li Xiao nodded his head and looked at the dazzling array of dishes. His sharp gaze was unreadable as he said, "Thank you for your hard work, Xiao Yi." He had subtly changed the way he addressed her from Miss Yi to Xiao Yi. Although it was only a small change, it was enough to make Yi Yu happy. After serving rice to everyone, Yi Yu sat down quietly beside Li Jinan. There were 7 dishes and 1 soup. It was a sumptuous feast. Furthermore, every dish took a lot of effort to prepare. It looked, smelled, and tasted great. Just looking at it made one's thumb twitch. Li Xiao didn't stand on ceremony. He picked up his chopsticks and picked up a piece of pork rib. He had originally thought that since Yi Yu was from the north, even if the dishes she made were southern dishes, there would still be a hint of northern tastes in them. But who would have thought that after eating it, Li Xiao would feel surprised? Putting down his chopsticks, Li Xiao praised, "I didn't expect little Yi to be not only good-looking, but also a good cook. Not bad." Yi Yu was a little embarrassed by the compliment and replied, "You're too kind, uncle. It's just some home-cooked dishes." Li Xiao didn't say anything else. He ate slowly and glanced at Li Jianqian. When Li Jianqian was with his own family, he didn't feel alienated. He took the chopsticks and reached out his short arms to pick up the food. After taking a bite of the meat, Li Jiannan asked, "Is Young Yan's cooking delicious?" Li Jianqian nodded immediately. "Delicious." Yi Yu smiled and picked up some food for him. She said, "Eat more if you like it. Try this." "Let him take it himself," Li Jiannan said. "This guy can't even use chopsticks properly. He needs more training." When Li Jianqian heard that, he was indignant and retorted, "Who said that? I used it very well, all right? Even Grandpa and Grandma praised me. Look." Waving his chopsticks around, Li Jianqian looked like he was showing off as he said, "Ursa still doesn't know how to use chopsticks." Chapter 1621. Speaking of Li Jianyue, Li Jianqian felt even more upset. "I haven't seen them for a long time. I miss you so much." Li Jiannan could tell. He quickly changed the topic and talked about his childhood. "When I was young, big brother and second brother liked to take me to the backyard to play with bamboo poles. Every time Auntie Li came out to chase people away, I was left alone there. The two of them ran faster than the other." Speaking of the past, Li Xiao also felt a little emotional. He couldn't help but laugh and say, "At that time, you were crying when that woman caught you. Your mother was so angry because of you. I was usually busy in the army, so it was your grandfather who caught you one by one and gave you a good beating." "How could that be? Grandpa only slapped them, not me. He just punished me to copy books." Li Jiannan felt a little aggrieved. "You might as well just beat me up. Copying books is too annoying. If it wasn't for your grandfather punishing you to copy books, would you be able to write such good characters now? Their handwriting isn't bad either. Even if I don't practice, I'd still be just like them." "That's far from it. Your second brother was born with good handwriting. Not to mention your eldest brother. He's only capable of wielding swords and spears. You're almost the same, but people like you can only be taught after being beaten." Li Jiannan felt a little awkward and asked, "Dad, can you save me some face in front of my wife?" Yi Yu's lips curled into a smile. When Li Xiao heard this, he laughed and said, "You three brothers, no matter who you are, you were not easy to deal with when you were young. If you don't beat them for 3 days, they'll go up the roof and tear down the tiles. Everyone is the same." Throughout the meal, Yi Yu didn't say much. However, she had heard many stories about Li Jiannan's childhood. She had learned a lot. However, Yi Yu realized that during the meal, she was not feeling well at all. It seemed that the little fellow was not very happy. Li Jianqian ate and didn't talk much. From his expression, it could be seen that he was in low spirits. After dinner, Yi Yu called the little fellow over to her. She squeezed his little hand and asked, "What's wrong? Not in a good mood?" Li Jianqian shook his head. When Yi Yu saw that, she said, "Wait a moment." Yi Yu walked back to her room and took out the little gift she had bought when she was grocery shopping that afternoon. It was a crystal ball that was exquisitely crafted. There were many refractive surfaces on it, making it look extremely dazzling. I don't know if you've heard the story of the crystal ball. There was a witch who turned her 3 sons into various animals. Yi Yu looked at him and softly told the story. She said, "In the end, he used the crystal ball to break all the spells and lived happily with the princess." As she spoke, she fiddled with the crystal ball in her hand and stuffed it into his hand. "I don't know why you're unhappy, but one day, there will be someone who will break all of your barriers. All of your unhappiness will be dispelled by that person. Thank you, little aunt." Li Jianqian held the crystal ball and looked at the hundreds of himself reflected in it. "I miss my sister." As he spoke, his eyes were a little red. He raised his head and said, "Although she is very stupid and often causes me trouble, I have never been separated from her for such a long time since I was young." Chapter 1622. When Yi Yu heard that, she reached out and rubbed his head. "That won't happen. I can't wait to admire you. Why would I embarrass you? You're a good brother." Li Jianxian lowered his head and didn't say anything. Looking at the crystal ball in his hand, his little face was expressionless. Yushio the Li family. Li Jianhua hugged Xiao Su, who was still a puppy, and wailed loudly. Her tears and snot were running down her face. The golden retriever frowned, feeling wronged, and started barking along with them. Li Mosen stood in front of her helplessly and said, "Why are you crying all of a sudden? Look, even the dog is scared by you." Li Jianhua cried even louder. Her fair and tender little face was full of pink crying marks. Li Jianhua's little body trembled as she cried and said loudly, I miss my brother, sob sob sob." The little girl's voice was soft and sobbing. It reminded Li Mosen of the past few days. Li Mosen saw that the little bed next to him, which was supposed to be sleeping with someone, was suddenly empty. For the next few days Li Mosen felt a little down. Recently, when he saw Li Jianhua always laughing and playing with Xiao Su, he thought that she had forgotten. But who knew that once this kind of longing burst out, she couldn't control it. Daesu went to the imperial capital alone. Would he miss them as much as they missed him? Perhaps he would. Perhaps he would also happily play with the children in the imperial capital and forget about his duties, right? Li Mosen's heart felt empty. He went forward and pulled Li Jianhua into his arms. "Don't cry. If Daesu knew that you were crying, he would feel sad." Sob sob sob. Li Jianhua lay on Li Mosen's shoulder. Her tears and snot wiped on the clothes on his shoulder. "Brother is very sad now. I can feel that brother is not happy." As she spoke, Li Jianhua wiped her tears and said, "Mommy said that if brother doesn't want to stay in the capital, I can bring him back." The little girl seemed to have grasped the life-saving straw. She wiped her tears and sniffed hard. "Mommy said that adults can't go back on their words." As he muttered to himself, he immediately got up. Hearing the baby crying, Nanny Rong was touched. His old eyes were also a little red. When he saw Li Jianhua running out barefoot, he hurriedly said, "Hey, how can you run out without wearing shoes? Quickly put on your shoes before you go." Li Jianhua acted as if she hadn't heard anything. She ran straight to the phone in the living room and picked it up. Following her memory, she called Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi usually played and told stories with the children at home, but recently she had been busy in the company. Therefore, she had been staying in the company during the day. She helped Li Xiqing deal with some small things, which was similar to Cheng Yu's. At this moment, when she received a call from home, she immediately thought it was Nanny Rong. He picked it up, only to find that it was someone else. The sound of the little guy crying could be heard very quickly. Li Jianhua cried, "Mommy, I miss my brother." Chapter 1623. Mommy, you're lying. The brother next door is on vacation. He goes home every day. Why doesn't my brother come home? Li Jianhua cried even harder. She sat on the stool and let Nanny Rong help her put on her shoes. When Su Qianxi heard this, she felt a headache coming on. She said, "School is over, not vacation. Vacation is different from school. When will brother come home from school?" "After school. Brother will go straight to Grandma and Grandpa's house in the capital. He won't come back to this house. Vacation means that he doesn't have to go to school for many days." "Then, when will brother go on vacation?" "After the winter vacation. Brother can come back during the winter vacation." Li Jianhua was confused, but when she heard that her brother could come back, she immediately stopped crying and said, "Then Mommy, when is the winter vacation?" "It's around the new year." "Then when is the new year?" Hearing this series of questions, Su Qianxi smiled and said patiently, "When Mom's birthday is over, then Daesu and Ursa's birthday is over, and when Grandpa's birthday is over, brother can come back." Ah! Li Jianhua looked defeated. She pursed her lips and wanted to cry again. She said, "Brother won't come home for his birthday?" "Yes, he won't. Let Grandpa and Grandma celebrate it for him." Sob, sob, sob. Li Jianhua cried. Don't we have a vacation when we celebrate our birthdays? Mommy can celebrate our birthdays with us every year. Why can mommy have a vacation but not brother? Brother has a vacation too. Su Qianxi was very patient. She thought for a moment and said, You're talking about the National Day holiday. When that time comes, mommy will take you and brother Mosen to the capital, okay? Really? Li Jianhua was excited. Her eyes were as bright as stars. The dark water was as bright as 2 crescent moons. It was beautiful. When Li Mosen saw it, he was stunned. When he met Li Jianhua's gaze, he quickly looked away, a little embarrassed. Really? Su Qianxi said. Then it's a promise. When the holidays come, you will take us to the capital. Li Jianhua cheered and finally stopped crying. She said, Does daddy agree too? Su Qianxi smiled. Was this little girl afraid that she would say empty words and Li Xiqing would not agree? He said helplessly, Sure. Hooray! Li Jianhua was overjoyed. She blew a kiss at the phone and said, Mommy, I love you. I love you too, she whispered. I'm busy. I'll talk when I get home later. Yes, yes, Mom. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, baby. Su Qianxi hung up and finally felt relieved. In the office, Li Xiqing looked over and said, I was going to go too. Then why didn't you tell me? Ursu is crying so pitifully. They have never been separated since they were young. Now suddenly going to the capital alone. She will definitely not be used to it. Don't you know how to comfort her? Li Xiqing continued with his work and said, Words of comfort are not as effective as actions. Staring at her with his dark eyes, Li Xiqing said, And I'm not going to take you there. Su Qianxi was upset and asked, Why? The air pressure on the plane fluctuates too much. I'm afraid of hurting the child. It's all right. Chapter 1624. I'm just going to see my son. How is that a rush? Su Qianxi was not convinced and said, And there is still more than a month until October. It should be very stable in a month. Li Xiqing glanced at her and said, We'll talk about it when the time comes. Hearing that, Su Qianxi was so angry that her cheeks puffed up. She pushed the documents away and said, Do it yourself. Li Xiqing was speechless. Putting down the documents in his hand, Li Xiqing stood up and walked toward her. Su Qianxi was sitting next to the floor-to-ceiling window with her back to him. Seeing the reflection on the floor-to-ceiling window, Su Qianxi looked at it, but did not respond. Li Xiqing walked over and hugged her from behind. He whispered, Are you angry? Su Qianxi did not speak, closed her eyes and leaned against the sofa. Li Xiqing looked down at her, and then sat down next to her. He whispered, Don't be angry. It's almost time to get off work. Let's go eat. I'm not eating with you. Su Qianxi closed her eyes and said, My daughter is waiting for me at home. She's also my daughter. Get up. Let's go eat with her. Li Xiqing gently put his hand on her shoulder and said. Su Qianxi opened her eyes and looked suspiciously at his desk that was full of documents. Can you go home now? Are you done? That's just a small matter. It's not small. The design plan and the quotation from the UK are all waiting for your reply. You haven't seen it yet, have you? As she spoke, Su Qianxi stood up and walked to her desk. She flipped her palm and quickly took out a document. Then she took out another one and said, Here, you haven't finished it yet. Li Xiqing walked over and put down the document in her hand. It's a small matter. Let's go. No, you finish it first. We'll go after you're done. I'll do it tomorrow. No. Su Qianxi's attitude was very firm. Li Xiqing was helpless and said, Then wait for me. Okay. Su Qianxi nodded, and then picked up her tablet to search for toys that girls liked. Li Xiqing was a good person in everything. He either didn't do it or devoted himself to it. After more than an hour, Su Qianxi looked at the time and found it was already past 6 p.m. He browsed the web while eating snacks. He was not idle at all. After dealing with the work, he asked his secretary to come in and tidy up his desk. Then they left together. Su Qianxi had just found a few nice dresses. She handed them to him and asked, What do you think of these? Li Xiqing glanced at it and nodded. You have good taste, but you need to prepare more clothes for little girls. There's no need to prepare so much. Ursu can't wear them all by herself. It's a waste to leave them there. I'm talking about preparing the baby. Isn't our little daughter still pregnant? Damn, you know it's your daughter? What if it's a son? It's a daughter. You see, we already have 2 sons and only 1 daughter, so this must be a daughter. Su Qianxi was amused by his absurd reasoning. She said, "Who would guess like that? I think it must be his son. We don't want a son anymore. If we have another son, we will have 3 sons." Li Xiqing frowned. Then how are we going to raise them in the future? It was too difficult for my parents to raise the 3 of us. Chapter 1625. Su Qianxi touched her slightly bulging belly and looked down, thinking. It was said that a daughter was a mommy's most considerate little cotton-padded jacket. She had almost no reaction when she was pregnant with this child. Could this really be his daughter? If that was true, then wouldn't the house be turned upside down by them? Li Xiqing loved his daughter so much that he was out of control. As for his son, he was basically left to fend for himself. Especially Li Jianxian. Li Xiqing even left him to fend for himself, and directly threw him to the capital. Touching her belly, she whispered, "I think it's a son." Humph. Li Xiqing looked at her. Sons and daughters are the same. What are you humming for? You just want a daughter. Don't think I don't know. She pointed at his nose. Do you know what Daisa likes to eat? Stewed eggs. Su Qianxi was surprised. So you knew. Do you know what Daisa dislikes the most? Li Xiqing said with disdain. You underestimate me. He is my son after all. What is it? Tell me. Coriander. She snorted and turned her head. I thought you didn't know. How is that possible? Li Xiqing said helplessly. I even know what Mosen likes and dislikes. Not to mention that he's my biological son. Su Qianxi looked at Li Xiqing and said, Speaking of Mosen, I dreamed of Tang Jinghao last night. Li Xiqing gazed at her. Su Qianxi was still in shock and said, I dreamed that he was killed by Bo Xiao in the fire. There was such a big hole in his head, and even his brain was spurting out. And Tang Minjing's mother. Why are you dreaming of these people? Li Xiqing frowned in dissatisfaction and said, You should quickly forget about these things. It's useless to remember these people. Of course I know, but a dream is a dream. What can I do? Su Qianxi thought for a moment and said, I wonder how Tang Mingqing is doing. Rich in Vietnam, Li Xiqing said. I have people watching her. Don't worry, she can't do anything. Vietnam? Yeah, Li Xiqing said. Let's go home. He took out his car keys and opened the door. Su Qianxi quickly followed up and asked, Does she know that you have someone watching her? I don't know. It would be terrible if I knew. He opened the car door for her and fastened the seat belt for her. My people have become her neighbors. Oh, that works too. Okay. He drove the car slowly and was soon on the road home. Hey, I also dreamed about something else last night. When Mosen grew up, he looked exactly like Tang Minjing. He knew that the tragedy of the Tang family was indirectly caused by us. He hated me very much. Mrs. Li, he interrupted her. I need to remind you of a few things. She blinked and did not say anything. First, the Tang family's fate was not a tragedy. It was a matter of course. Holding the steering wheel firmly, Li Xiqing glanced at her and said, There's a saying that goes, if you don't ask for it, you won't die. They deserved it. Have you forgotten what they did to you? But Chapter 1626. How could she forget? At that time, in the abandoned warehouse in the eastern suburbs, Tang Jinghao had sent someone to hold a steel pipe as thick as 2 fingers to her belly. At that time, her belly was already 7 or 8 months old. She was pregnant with twins, so her belly was much bigger than the average person's. If that had happened, it wouldn't have just been 2 children. It would have been adults. Although she and the children were not harmed, she had lost her man for more than 4 years. Although it was already over, the despair was still very clear. Thinking of the past, Su Qianxi shivered and was still in shock. Looking at Li Xiqing, a living man was right in front of her, driving the car steadily. Su Qianxi calmed down and said, I won't forget. Seeing this, Li Siqing knew that she had already thought it through and said, "Do you remember that I once told you that the Tang family has the blood of ingrates flowing in their bones?" Of course she remembered. "Don't be afraid that Mosin will hate us. Now that things have come to this, we can only resign ourselves to fate." Li Siqing sighed. "If it really is like what you dreamed, then I will accept it. Who asked me to have a stupid kind wife?" Su Qianxi didn't dare to speak. She opened her eyes and stared at Li Siqing. When she adopted Li Mosin, she only felt that the child was very pitiful. She didn't think too much about it. In fact, after adopting Li Mosin, Su Qianxi hadn't even thought about this possibility. Who would have thought that such an unintentional dream would actually lead to such a worrying hidden danger? Li Siqing glanced at her and said, "Don't think too much about it. I was just saying it casually. Mosin was raised by us. We will slowly train him in the future. Now he is a child of the Li family." Su Qianxi's heart slowly relaxed. She muttered to herself, "No matter how strong the bloodline is, it can't overcome the influence of the environment." As she spoke, she looked forward and murmured, "He is only 5 years old now. What happens in the future will depend on his upbringing." Smart. Li Siqing's eyes curved. "You are indeed my wife. You have always been smart. This is called being influenced by one's company. Shameless." The court opened, and Shen Luoan sat in the courtroom as the defendant. Yi Yuyu and Li Jinnan, on the other hand, sat among the audience and looked ahead. Both Shen Luo and Guan Yanhong looked to be in bad shape. Both of them had lost a lot of weight, with unshaven beards and dark circles under their eyes. For Guan Yanhong, it was because of his daughter. For Shen Luoan, it was because of the sudden imprisonment. "The plaintiff, I Guan, has accused me of murdering his daughter. I shun have confessed. On account of my good repentance, I shall be sentenced to 20 years in prison." A heavy hammer slammed down, announcing that everything was settled. The weight in Yi Yuyu's heart was lifted. The Shen family's parents were excited, and Mrs. Shen burst into tears. "That's great, we don't have to die. We still have a chance to come out." Shen Jilia had only arrived in the capital yesterday afternoon. He reached out to pat his mother on the back and looked at Shen Luoan with a frown. Shen Longyue, on the other hand, had a gloomy expression on his face. No one knew what he was thinking. Guan Yanhong stood up in court and bellowed, "How is that possible? I refuse to accept this. I want to appeal. Scum! You're all scum. Did my daughter die in vain?" Dash. Chapter 1627. The judge was very displeased and yelled, "Silence!" Guan Yanhong acted as if he hadn't heard him and said, "There must be a trap. I'm not convinced. I want to appeal. This is the Supreme People's Court. Security, escort him away." Guan Yanhong was escorted away by 2 burly men, but he didn't stop. As he struggled, he yelled and screamed. His voice was very loud. The judge dismissed the court, and Shen Luo, and was quickly escorted away. As he was being escorted away, his eyes were fixed on Yi Yuyu, who was sitting in the audience. Yi Yuyu felt as if her heart was throbbing in pain. Li Jinnan gently placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "Don't worry. I'll get him out." Yi Yuyu's eyes reddened as she hugged Li Jinnan. Li Jinnan gently caressed her shoulder. His eyes darkened as he remained silent. When Shen Longyue and the rest of the Shen family witnessed the scene, they were not very happy. When Yi Yuyu had been with the Shen family, Shen Longyue hadn't been very fond of her. He had felt that the girl was very vicious. She had harmed Guan Kui so badly at such a young age. After spending some time with her, he realized that the girl wasn't very brave. She was also very kind. How could such a child push her own sister off the cliff? Because old Mrs. Shen didn't like her, Shen Longyue couldn't be bothered to talk to her. On the other hand, Mrs. Shen was quite close to Yi Yuyu. Shen Jilia's relationship with Yi Yuyu wasn't bad either. Mrs. Shen wiped away her tears as she looked at Yi Yuyu and Li Jinnan. He walked over to Yi Yuyu's side and called out, "Yuyu." Yi Yuyu and Li Jinnan were in each other's embrace. She didn't notice them approaching. When she heard Mrs. Shen's voice, her body stiffened as she turned her head to look. Mrs. Shen's eyes were about to turn into little light bulbs from crying. They were slightly swollen, and her eyes were red. She looked exhausted. It was obvious that the past few days had been a torment for her. Yi Yu turned around and greeted, "Uncle Auntie Julia." Everything had reverted to how it had been before Yi Yu had married Shen Luoan. Shen Longhua felt a little sad. His emotions were complicated. Mrs. Shen felt even sadder. She sobbed and said, "Thank you. Auntie, what are you thanking me for?" Yi Yu's gaze was calm as she replied, "If you're thanking me for helping Shen Luoan, there's no need to thank me. It's what I should do. If it wasn't for him, I would be the one being wrongfully imprisoned." Yi Yu was telling the truth. When Mrs. Shen heard that, she sighed heavily. After all, Yi Yu used to be part of their family. Even though they were divorced, it was still difficult for him to forget her. That was why he had chosen to stand up for her at this critical juncture. She continued, "If you're thanking me for divorcing Shen Luoan, you don't have to thank me." Looking at the complicated expression on Mrs. Shen's face, Yi Yu felt a sense of satisfaction. After a pause, she slowly said, "If he hadn't divorced me in order to be with Guan Kui, I wouldn't be with the man I truly love right now." When Mrs. Shen heard this, her heart ached. Yu Yu. Chapter 1628. If it hadn't been for old Mrs. Shen's cold treatment, Yi Yu probably wouldn't have been so resolute in their divorce. They wouldn't be where they were now. All of this was thanks to old Mrs. Shen, but the way she addressed her as auntie broke Mrs. Shen's heart. When he looked down and saw Yi Yu rubbing her abdomen, he understood what was going on. After a long time, he nodded and said, "You've worked hard during that period." That period of time. Tears welled up in Yi Yu's eyes. She forced a smile and said, "It wasn't hard at all. We're leaving now. Goodbye." "Goodbye." Yi Yu pulled Li Jinan and turned around. Her heart ached. Li Jinan stayed by her side the entire time without saying a word. When they walked out of the courthouse, Li Jinan pulled her gently and asked, "Are you all right?" She hugged him and gently said, "I'm fine. I'm just a little sad." "What are you sad about?" Li Jinan's voice was soft and slightly hoarse. "What are you upset about?" Yi Yu didn't know what she was upset about. After a long while he said softly, "Things remain the same, but people have changed. It's just a little sad. Let's go back." "Yes." Just as the two of them reached the parking lot, they saw Li Jinnan's black car from afar. It was covered in a layer of colorful paint. The smell of paint was very strong. Yi Yu was stunned and looked at Li Jinnan. Li Jinnan's brows were tightly knitted together. It was obvious that he hadn't expected such a thing to happen. As if to test the waters, Li Jinnan pressed the key, and sure enough, the car lights immediately lit up. Their car had been splashed with paint. Regardless of whether it was Yi Yu or Li Jinnan, this was the first time they had encountered such a situation. Just as the two of them were standing there, a person walked out from the back of the car. It was Yi Tian. Yi Tian was dressed in a beautiful, luxurious, and high-heeled dress. She exuded elegance and elegance. She walked over with a handbag in her hand. When she saw Li Jinnan, her eyes were filled with resentment. "I finally meet you, my precious daughter." Judging by Yi Tian's expression, it was obvious that she was up to no good. Yi Yu looked at Yi Tian in this state. The gentle image of Yi Tian in the past was gradually becoming more and more distant from her name. The mother-daughter bond that she'd thought she'd had with Guan Kui had vanished into thin air after the slap she'd given her at her wedding. "Did you do this?" Li Jinnan's eyes were cold, and his face was expressionless. When Yi Tian heard Li Jinnan's words, she laughed dryly and replied, "So what if I did it? You rascal, you're refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. You tricked my daughter away. It's only right that I destroy your car." Such a hooligan comment made Li Jinnan so angry that he laughed. He picked up his cell phone and dialed 110. When Yi Tian saw that he was calling for help, her expression changed. "You little rascal, what are you trying to do?" "Little brat, who are you calling?" Li Jinnan replied lazily, and didn't bother to explain. The call was quickly connected. Li Jinnan said, "Hello, police comrade. I am now at the entrance of the First People's Court." Yi Tian's expression changed drastically as she said, You little be asterisk starred. You've eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts. How dare you call the police after lying to my daughter? As she spoke, she rushed forward and reached out her hand to snatch the phone. Before she could even touch Li Jinnan's hand, Li Jinnan dodged her. Chapter 1629. All of a sudden, Yi Tian's pretense of elegance vanished into thin air. With a look of hatred on her face, she yelled, Yi Yu, what are you doing? Can't you see this be asterisk starred bullying your mother? Is this how you treat your mother? Yi Yu looked at her coldly when she heard that. When Yi Yu saw that Yi Yu didn't speak, she grew even more frustrated. She yelled, Yi Yu. When Yi Yu heard her yell, she walked over to Li Jinnan's side. Li Jinnan had already made the police report. After explaining the situation in a concise manner, he stood by the side of the car. Yi Tian's clothes were disheveled, and her hair was disheveled. When she saw the state she was in, she felt that she had lost her chance. That was an unbearable feeling for anyone, much less Yi Tian. All these years she had pursued and wanted, and she had gotten everything she wanted. In the end, everything had been ruined by Yi Yu. Yi Tian walked briskly in Yi Yu's direction. She reached out to grab Yi Yu's hand and said, Come with me. Hurry. Yi Yu dodged to the side and coldly asked, What are you doing? What am I doing? Yi Tian laughed mirthlessly. I'm bringing my daughter home. When Yi Yu heard that, it was as if she had heard a joke. She shifted to the side and asked, Am I your daughter? If you're not my daughter, then whose daughter are you? I thought that only Guan Kui was your daughter, Yi Yu said sarcastically. She scoffed. All these years, you've never treated me as your daughter. Why are you putting on an act now? Yi Yu mocked her sarcastically. She scoffed. When Yi Tian heard that, she looked shocked. Her slightly disheveled hair complemented Yi Tian's expression, making her look even more pathetic and downtrodden. Yi Tian was heartbroken. She looked at Yi Yu with a hint of sadness in her eyes and said, How could you think that way? All these years, if I hadn't treated you as my daughter, I would have chased you away a long time ago. In fact, you've already chased me away. Yi Yu's heart ached as the memories of the past came flooding back. When Guan Kui had gotten into trouble, Yi Tian had cried her heart out on Guan Kui's bed and called her precious daughter. At that time, everyone gave her the cold shoulder. Other than the initial blame, Yi Yu spent the rest of the time blaming herself. When she couldn't stand the self-blame anymore, she left the Guan family. She thought that Yi Tian would try to persuade her to stay. However, the truth made her heart turn cold. Not only did Yi Tian not try to persuade him to stay, she even said in agreement, That's a good idea. You move out first, and we'll talk about the rest later. One sentence in the future, and there would be no future. Yi Yu didn't want to return to the Guan family. However, Yi Yu still wanted to acknowledge her as her mother. Who would have guessed that when she was seriously injured while filming, Yi Tian had only visited her twice in the hospital for over a month. She had been hospitalized for over a month. Moreover, they would only stay for less than half a day before leaving in a hurry. Compared to the incident with Guan Kui all those years ago, Yi Tian was far too cold toward him. This time, when Guan Kui died, Yi Tian had slapped her in front of everyone. Yi Yu had already seen through everything. Perhaps in Yi Tian's heart, she never saw herself as a part of her new family. Chapter 1630. Yi Yu laughed self-deprecatingly. She looked at Yi Tian with ridicule in her eyes. When Yi Tian heard Yi Yu's words, it was as if she had been greatly hurt. She replied, How could that be? You were the one who wanted to leave. I couldn't even stop you. Yi Yu's lips curled into a mocking smile as she replied, Is that so? I'm really sorry to have caused you so much trouble. Yi Tian looked relieved. She stepped forward and extended her hand to Yi Yu. Don't throw a tantrum at mommy anymore. Come home with mommy. I don't have a daughter anymore. I don't want to lose you as well. Yu, mommy's good daughter. Come home with me, okay? When Yi Yu heard that, it was as if a thin layer of ice had slowly melted away from her frozen heart. However, at the same time, A scorching hot brand was ruthlessly stabbed into it. It was painful and thick smoke billowed out. Are you referring to Guan Kui when you say you don't have a daughter? Yi Yu asked softly. Her tone was extremely sarcastic. Yi Tian couldn't figure out what Yi Yu was getting at. After a moment she said, Yu Yu, mommy knows that you hate me, but blood is thicker than water. Your father has already divorced me, and he's filing for divorce. This is all your fault. If it weren't for you, Kui wouldn't have done something so foolish. Yi Tian's words made Li Jinnan's eyes narrow. Yi Yu didn't react in time. She only paid attention to the first half of her sentence. With a cold laugh she asked, Are you referring to Guan Yanhong? Yi Tian was stunned for a moment before replying. Yes, I only have one father. His name is Yi Zhenhua. Guan Yanhong is merely your husband and my stepfather. Yi Yu looked at Yi Tian with sympathy in her eyes. Is my stepfather finally seeing your true colors and divorcing you? That's a cause for celebration. Her tone was exactly the same as when Yi Qianqian had mocked her a few days ago. Yi Tian widened her eyes and looked at Yi Yu in disbelief. When Yi Yu saw the expression on her face, her lips curled up in a smile as she said, Filing for divorce. Does that mean you're leaving the family with nothing? That's right, Li Jinan replied. He looked at Yi Tian sympathetically and said, Come to think of it, your mother was quite pitiful. Yi Yu hadn't expected him to suddenly speak. She turned to look at him with surprise in her eyes. She's already so old. She's at the end of her life, yet she got divorced. She won't have any children to send her off in the future. How tragic. Li Jinan clicked his tongue and shook his head. His eyes were filled with pity. When Yi Yu heard that, she didn't feel good either. Yi Tian was indeed no longer young. Marrying the wrong man had ruined her life. When Yi Tian heard his words, she flew into a rage. You jerk. Before she could finish her sentence, Li Jinan interrupted her. Li Jinnan's dark eyes shone like the stars as he gazed at Yi Tian. Enunciating each word, he said, I sympathize with you. Because of Guan Kui, your life has been ruined. If it weren't for Guan Kui, your daughter wouldn't have refused to acknowledge you, he said. Yi Qianqian was destined to have nothing to do with you from the moment you divorced your ex-husband. Right now, even Yi Yu, who is somewhat related to you by blood, and could possibly take care of you in your old age, doesn't want to acknowledge you. This is all Guan Kui's fault, isn't it? Chapter 1631. Li Jinan looked at Yi Tian and took a step forward. In a slow voice he said, If Guan Kui hadn't done what she did, why would Guan Yanhong divorce you? Yi Tian's resentment toward Guan Kui grew by the second. Yi Yu couldn't figure out what Li Jinan was up to. She couldn't help but look at him in confusion. At that moment, Li Jinnan's dark and sharp eyes were fixed on Yi Tian. He didn't even blink. It was as if he was trying to read something from Yi Tian's expression. He watched as the hatred on Yi Tian's face deepened. Guan Kui did such a thing at her own wedding, and even framed your biological daughter. Now her father wants to divorce you. Aren't you angry? Yi Qianqian asked. Li Jinnan's words were gentle and persuasive. When Yi Yu heard that, she could vaguely guess what Li Jinnan was trying to do. At that moment, Yi Tian had completely lost the ability to distinguish between the two, especially when she thought about how hard she had worked for the Guan family all these years. When Guan Yanhong was tired, she would give him a massage. When Guan Kui was hospitalized, she would run all over the place to serve her. When she was married to Yi Zhenhua, she would never have had the chance to do something like that. Back then, Yi Zhenhua worked during the day and would come home to accompany her at night. When she was tired, he would massage her muscles. When she was sad, he would do his best to cheer her up. That kind of treatment was completely reversed when it came to Guan Yanhong. However, that kind of sacrifice continued for more than a decade. She had spent the best of her time with Guan Yanhong and Guan Kui. Of all the times Guan Kui had died, Guan Yanhong wanted to divorce her. Furthermore, he had resorted to all means to force her out of the family. Yi Tian hadn't expected such a turn of events. She couldn't accept it. When she heard Li Jinnan's words, the hatred in Yi Tian's heart grew. Unfortunately, even if you hate them, they won't sympathize with you. There was no warmth in Li Jinnan's words. It was as if he was narrating an insignificant matter. Because of Guan Kui's stubbornness and Guan Yanhong's heartlessness, you'll lose your daughter for the rest of your life. No one will take care of you in your old age. When you're old, you'll have to stay in a rented house alone. Even if you die in there, no one will know. That's your fate. Li Jinnan's words were like icicles that pierced right into the heart of Yi Tian's worries. Behind the broken window was the bloody, cruel truth that Yi Tian refused to accept. How is that possible? That day will never come. Yi Tian roared angrily. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to trick me? It's not that easy. When Li Jinnan heard that, he coldly mocked her and said, I'm just telling you what your future will be like. However, even if I don't say it out loud, you'll be able to figure it out for yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today and trying to get Yi to leave with you, would you? Yi Tian's expression darkened when she heard that. Li Jinnan's eyes were filled with mockery. He looked at her calmly and said, It's time for you to make plans for the future, Madam Yi. Yi Tian's expression changed. She asked helplessly, What can I do? Chapter 1632. Li Jinnan's red lips were tightly pursed. His brows were slightly furrowed. His expression couldn't be more serious. Yi Yuyu, who was listening from the side, trembled in fear. She looked at Li Jinnan in a different light. She had never imagined that Li Jinnan would have such a sharp side to him. Yi Tian was moved by Li Jinnan's words. She gritted her teeth and said, He's also a B****starred. He clearly knew that Guan Kui committed suicide. But he insisted that it was Yi Yuyu's fault, and almost landed her in jail. That old B****starred is just like that little B****starred. Both of them are degenerates. Yi Yuyu's heart skipped a beat when she heard Yi Tian's words. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Guan Kui committed suicide? In other words, everything that Guan Yanhong had done was all a facade. They knew the truth a long time ago, but they just didn't want to say it. Yi Yuyu's heart, which was already cold, suddenly felt as if a blizzard had struck it. She had thought that her heart couldn't be any colder. When she heard that Yi Tian had helped them hide such an important matter, she couldn't help but feel sad. Looking at Yi Tian, who was standing in front of her, Yi Yuyu wanted to laugh, but she couldn't. Who was the one who called the police just now? A booming voice rang out. Yi Tian and Yi Yuyu were both startled. They turned their heads to look at the source of the voice. For police officers walked over and saw the car that had been splashed with colorful paint. It was me, Li Jinnan replied. What's going on? Li Jinnan briefly explained the situation. Yi Tian was a little shocked. She instinctively took a step back, but she was quickly restrained by the police. Come with us. Sir, you should come with us too. Li Jinnan nodded his head slightly and replied. Indeed, I should make the trip. There's something else that I need your help with as well. Let's talk about it at the police station, the officer said. Leave this to us. We'll get someone to test the model of the car and how long it's been bought. We'll then ask for compensation from this lady. One of the police officers looked at the car and shook his head. This car doesn't look cheap. It must cost at least $1 million. When she heard the price, Yi Tian's face turned pale. At the moment, Yi Tian and Guan Yanhong were in the midst of divorce proceedings. If everything went according to plan, Yi Tian would not get a single penny after the divorce. There was no alimony, and there was nothing more. How was he going to take out more than $1 million? When Li Jinnan saw the expression on Yi Tian's face, he already had a plan in mind. He said, Madam Yi, perhaps we can discuss this privately. The policemen looked at each other. They could not figure out what this young man wanted to do. It's such an expensive car. Even if she wants to settle it privately, she can't afford to pay for it. However, judging by Yi Tian's attire, she didn't look like she couldn't afford it. Why did his expression change so much? When Yi Tian heard Li Jinnan's words, it was as if she had grabbed hold of a life-saving straw. She immediately replied, Let's settle it out of court. Private. You're my son-in-law after all. You can't really make me pay so much money, right? Yi Yu found those words laughable. She retorted, Why didn't you think of the consequences when you ordered them to splash paint? Besides, who's your son-in-law? Our relationship is no longer that of mother and daughter, Madame Yi Tian. Chapter 1633. She had only splashed the paint on the car for a moment of pleasure. She had originally thought that the car belonged to Yi Yuyu's man anyway. No matter what, he would give Yi Yuyu face and not be calculative with her. After all, the Li family wasn't lacking in money. She had been wrong. She had been terribly wrong. Yi Tian had never expected that Li Jinnan would actually call the police without any hesitation. He didn't show any mercy at all. She clenched her jaw and glared at Yi Yuyu. In a fit of rage she said, "I'm your mother." Yi Yuyu shook her head and replied, "You don't deserve it." Those 3 words were spoken casually, but they completely dissipated Yi Tian's anger. These 3 words suddenly intertwined into a force that fiercely smashed into the bottom of her heart. It hurt. Compared to the taunts Yi Qianqian had uttered a few days ago, those words made her feel even sadder. Yuyu. Yi Tian looked at Yi Yuyu with a pained expression. The series of changes that had occurred in such a short period of time had made Li Jinnan feel disgusted and pathetic. In all his 30 years of living, he had never seen such a despicable person. He couldn't be bothered to continue watching her act and said, "Settle it out of court. Otherwise, we'll both go to the police station. If we can't afford it, we'll go to jail. Pick one." Yi Tian panicked when she heard that. "How can I go to jail? I'm your mother-in-law." "That's not what you said just now." Li Jinnan's tone was mocking, but it was barely noticeable. Yi Tian was at a loss for words. She quickly said, "Settle it out of court. What do you want? If that's the case, I'll have to trouble you to go back." "I'm sorry." The officers who had been dispatched were all veteran officers who had been on the job for many years, but they had never encountered such a bizarre incident. Anyone who saw a car worth millions defiled in such a manner would have to go to the police station for a visit. This was the first time that the owner of the car had suggested settling it out of court. After all, it was someone else's business, and it wasn't appropriate to comment on it. After a few words of complaint, the police officers left. Li Jinnan looked at Yi Tian, and she looked back at him. Her eyes were filled with apprehension and anticipation as she asked, "What do you mean settle it out of court? Guan Kui committed suicide?" Yi Tian paused and asked, "You want me to testify for you? But hasn't you already come out?" "You don't need to know what I want. I just want to know the truth." Yi Tian was silent for a moment before replying, "I can tell you, but I have another condition." When Li Jinnan heard that, he laughed. "Do you think you have the right to negotiate terms with me now?" Yi Tian's expression changed, but she still braced herself and said, "Of course I do. No matter what you think of me, I'm still Yuyu's biological mother." "Since that's the case, if you want to marry my daughter, it's not too much to give me a betrothal gift, right?" Yi Yuyu was also angry and roared, "How can you be so shameless?" Yi Tian didn't seem to notice that she had been scolded. She ignored Yi Yuyu and continued to stare at Li Jinnan. When Li Jinnan heard that, he smiled and replied, "Of course. However, we have to take care of things one at a time. Why don't we find a place to sit down and talk things over?" "No, if you want to marry my daughter, you must have 1,000,000, not one less. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about today." When Yi Tian said this, she sounded as though she was in the right. Chapter 1634. She roared, "Have you ever treated me as your daughter all these years? Now that you're asking for money, you're calling me your daughter? Yi Tian, you're shameless." Yi Yuyu was so angry that she was practically spouting smoke. Yi Tian couldn't care less if others were calling her shameless or not. Now she wanted money. Money. When Yi Yuyu saw that Yi Tian wasn't speaking, she reached out and tugged on Li Jinnan's hand. "Don't agree to her request. The repair fees for this car alone will cost her a lot. If she doesn't pay up, let her go to jail. At the very least, food would be provided in jail. No matter what, Yi Tian wouldn't starve to death in jail. When she's released, she might turn over a new leaf. Everything else aside, She'll change her temper. When that time comes, I'll take care of her. Yi Yu had already made up her mind. She looked at Li Jinnan with a frown. Unexpectedly, Li Jinnan didn't even look at her. He looked at Yi Tian and said, "Fine, I agree to your request." When Yi Yu heard that, she panicked and said, "Are you stupid? You've been tricked." Li Jinnan reached out and placed his hand on hers. "She's right. If I want to marry you, I have to give your parents a betrothal gift. $1 million for a wife isn't a loss." When Yi Yu heard that, she felt even more indignant. She said, "You're really going to piss me off." Yi Tian, on the other hand, was elated. Her originally tense expression relaxed. Looking at Li Jinnan, Yi Tian felt more and more satisfied. She said, "You're the one who said it. Prove it to me. Come, I'll record it. In case you go back on your word." As she spoke, Yi Tian took out a recording pen and walked over to Li Jinnan. Yi Yu was infuriated. She reached out and slapped her hand away. Yi Tian quickly reached her hand back and urged, "Hurry up, son-in-law. After you're done recording, I'll give you something that you've always wanted." Yi Yu assumed that it was a trap and said, "No way." Yi Tian was infuriated. "Are you even my daughter? You traitorous B***th." Li Jinnan reached out and pulled Yi Yu behind him. He took the voice recorder from Yi Tian's hand and said in a serious tone, "I, Li Jinnan, have agreed to pay Madame Yi Tian the betrothal gift for my marriage to her daughter, Yi Yu. It is a total of $1 million. After recording one sentence, he threw the recording pen back. When Yi Tian heard that, she felt that it wasn't enough. She said, "That won't do. Say it again. Swear that the liar will die a horrible death and be struck by lightning." Yi Yu gritted her teeth in anger. "Don't go overboard. Swear on it." Yi Tian handed it to him aggressively. Li Jinnan's eyes lit up, and he did as he was told. Yi Tian played the recording and listened to it a few times. After confirming that there were no mistakes, she put the recording pen away. Then, she gave Li Jinnan a small ceramic pendant. The pendant was a Kelda duck. It looked very cute, and it was holding its head with a serious expression. Yi Tian gently clasped the bottom of the ceramic pendant, and a clear voice immediately played out. "Dad, I just received some unfortunate news." It was Guan Kui's voice. It was obvious that Guan Kui was speaking to Guan Yanhong. All these years, the one Shen Luo and loves the most is still Yi Yu. That's why he ran away from the wedding. Chapter 1635. I've wanted to marry him for so many years, but it wasn't just to call him my brother. What should I do, father? I realize that I'm so selfish. I actually want Shen Luoan to die. I want to kill him, and then commit suicide. Do you know that this idea has been in my mind for a long time, father? Guan Kui's voice began to sound like she was about to cry. She sounded very upset. Yi Yu's expression was complicated. She looked at Yi Tian and listened to the recording. Her heart sank. After receiving the news, I've been trying to call him, but his phone has been switched off. Dad, I'm thinking, is it because I'm not good enough? Or is it because I'm not as good as Yi Yu that he chose her over me? Every word that Guan Kui said was heartbreaking. It wasn't hard to imagine Guan Yanhong's face breaking down when he heard that. I just saw Yi Yu. She was with a man. The man looked so outstanding. He wasn't any worse than Shen Luoan. But why can't I ever meet a man like him? I can't accept this. Dad, since I can't kill Shen Luoan, I'll kill Yi Yu instead. That woman has ruined too much for me. I don't want to let her off so easily. In any case, I'm mentally ill. Mentally ill people don't have to bear any legal consequences when they commit crimes. At most, I'll just have to spend a few more days in the mental hospital. Li Jinnan's face darkened as he listened. He turned his head to look at Yi Yu. He was still in a state of shock. He didn't dare imagine what his reaction would have been if Yi Yu had been the one who had died. That way, Shen Luoan will be in great pain. Ha ha ha. Dad, isn't my idea great? Immediately, the recording device was filled with the sound of rustling. No one spoke again. Only the sound of glass containers clinking and water being poured could be heard. As long as Yi Yu drinks this, she will die without a doubt. Li Jinnan was filled with rage when he heard that. His originally expressionless face darkened to the extreme. Following that, the sound of thermos bottles clinking and lids being twisted could be heard. There was silence. Yi Yu hadn't expected to hear such content. She was shocked and confused. She asked, "That's it?" "Not yet. There's more to come," Yi Tian replied. Indeed, after a few minutes, the voice on the other end of the line said, "Dad, I've reconsidered. If I really kill Yi Yu, Shen Luo, and will not return to my side." As Guan Kui spoke, there seemed to be a bitter smile on her face. She self-deprecatingly said, "Who would want to spend the rest of their lives with a deranged murderer?" Indeed, he was quite self-aware. "So Dad, I've decided. I want them to remember me forever and never forget me." Guan Kui's voice paused for a moment. In a very soft voice he said, "Perhaps Luoan will forever feel guilty towards me. I want Yi Yu to be sentenced to death. I want Yi Yu to die. Haha, no one can stop me." When Li Jinnan and Yi Yu heard that, their hearts skipped a beat. "I love you, Dad. I hope I can be your daughter again in my next life. I've let you down in this life. Dash. Chapter 1636. At that point in the recording, the situation had become very clear. Li Jinnan's expression was extremely dark. On the other hand, Yi Yu's expression was one of confusion. It was as if she had expected it, but at the same time, it was beyond her expectations. She instinctively looked up at Li Jinnan. Even she didn't know how she was feeling at that moment. After a long time, she finally said, "In that case, can we use this recording to rescue Shen Luoan?" Yi Yu's words caused Yi Tian's expression to tense up. She instinctively squeezed the ceramic pendant, but she immediately let go. She looked at the pendant in her hand with a look of hesitation on her face. Because of Li Jinnan's words, Yi Tian had impulsively blurted out the matter and even produced the recording. Now that time had passed, Yi Tian had completely calmed down. She knew very well what the consequences would be if she really handed over this recording file. Once the item landed in the hands of Yi Yu and Li Jinnan, she would have gotten her money. However, it would be impossible for her and Guan Yanhong to be together again. Yi Tian was a little hesitant. She stared at the ceramic pendant and tightened her grip on it. All of a sudden, a big hand reached over and snatched the recording file away. Yi Tian was caught off guard. She gripped it tightly and exclaimed, "What are you doing?" Li Jinnan's eyes were cold. Without a care in the world, he snatched the object from her and said, "Madam Yi, we've already come to an agreement." As he spoke, he played the recording again. Yi Tian wanted to snatch it back, but Li Jinnan quickly raised his hand high. Yi Tian was even shorter than Yi Yu. She couldn't reach Li Jinnan's hand at all. The voice rang out clearly and played the recording again. After making sure that Yi Tian hadn't tampered with it, Li Jinnan stuffed the object into Yi Yu's handbag. "Keep this safe. We can contact the lawyer now." Li Jinnan's voice was cold and determined. He looked at Yi Tian with his bright, dark eyes and slowly said, "Thank you, Madam Yi." Yi Tian was getting more and more anxious. She looked at the Kelda duck that was being taken away and cried out, "Wait!" Li Jinnan ignored her. He held Yi Yu's hand and calmly said, "Let's go." Yi Yu reacted quickly and turned around. However, when he saw the car, he still felt like he was about to collapse. The destruction was too thorough. As Yi Tian watched them walk further and further away, she felt increasingly uneasy. He stood there for a long time without moving. "You have to plan for your own future. Guan Yanhong has already lost a daughter, and the two of you are about to get a divorce. Yi Tian, you have to work hard." In the empty parking lot, Yi Tian whispered to herself, "After the divorce, you'll have nothing. You won't have anyone to send you off when you're old. You have to make plans for yourself." Yi Tian muttered to herself. However, her heart felt increasingly empty. She looked ahead and saw Li Jinnan embracing Yi Yu. The sight of the two of them snuggling together was very sweet. This was her daughter, her son-in-law. At the end of the day, Yi Yu was his daughter. However, what she did today, was it right or wrong? Guan Yanhong was detained for 3 days. In the end, he was bailed out by his lawyer. Chapter 1637. Since I can't kill you, I'll make sure she lives the rest of her life alone. My daughter's death can't be in vain. When the lawyer heard Guan Yanhong's words, he hesitated and said, Mr. Guan, we might not be able to handle this matter for the time being. Guan Yanhong paused for a moment. He stood where he was and looked at the lawyer. With a smile, he said, In that case, we'll get another lawyer who can handle it. The lawyer's expression was still solemn as he said, I'm afraid that no matter how many lawyers you get, they won't be able to help you at this point in time. As he spoke, he took out a lawyer's letter and said, I've just received this. There's been a new development in the case of your daughter's death. What? A new development? Guan Yanhong thought he had heard wrongly and yelled, Isn't this case already closed? Shen Luo was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but that *th Yi was completely fine. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, Could the evidence be pointing back to that *th again? The lawyer shook his head and handed the letter over to Guan Yanhong. An ominous feeling rose in Guan Yanhong's heart. When he saw it, his heart skipped a beat. Yi Yu and Mr. Li Jinan, who were involved in this case, have once again presented evidence to prove that your daughter committed suicide on her own, and that it had nothing to do with anyone else. Guan Yanhong found it ridiculous and flew into a rage. He tore the paper in his hand into shreds and yelled, To hell with the evidence. She's already dead. The living were the ones who were locked up for 20 years. Now you're asking for those 20 years to be waived? Dream on. Guan Yanhong couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. At that moment, Guan Yanhong was dressed in a suit and leather shoes. On his wrist was a Vacheron Constantin business watch. His hands were on his hips, and he was seething with anger. The lawyer lowered his head in silence. He retrieved the documents and said, You might have to make a few more trips. This time, Yi Yu and Mr. Li Jinan are very firm in their stance. Furthermore, they've already spoken to the Shen family. They're requesting for a new investigation and a new trial. Is there any way I can avoid appearing in court? I'm afraid that's not possible. You're the client, and it's said. The lawyer deliberated over his words before he said slowly, It's said that this evidence was found in your room. Guan Yanhong was shocked. He turned to look at the lawyer in disbelief and asked, What did you say? The lawyer had already anticipated Guan Yanhong's reaction. Your wife is a direct participant in this matter, he said. Guan Yanhong felt a sharp pain in his chest when he heard that. The pain was so intense that Guan Yanhong didn't have time to react. His entire body slumped backward. The lawyer was shocked and quickly went forward to support him. Guan Yanhong collapsed on top of the lawyer, gasping for air. Guards! Help me call an ambulance. Guan Yanhong's sudden admission to the hospital was unexpected. However, the court summons should be issued as scheduled. The trial date was set to be 3 days later. During these 3 days, Shen Luo had been transferred from the prison and relocked in the detention center. Although they were both locked up, the meaning behind it was very different. Chapter 1638. At least the heavens had eyes and didn't let him be wronged in vain. Even though it was dark ahead, he could still see the light after enduring the darkness. He just didn't know how that person was doing now. Shen Luo looked at the dark surroundings and suddenly felt a little sad. But at the same time, he also felt relieved. Fortunately, Shen Manting had left. Otherwise, she would feel even more disgusted if she saw Shen Luo like this. In a small village in Jiangnan, the weather was clear. Under the blue sky, the thick white clouds blocked the blazing sun. The wind swept over, and it was very pleasant. Shen Manting walked on the road, her stomach slightly bulging. She was carrying the simple ingredients she had just bought, and was heading home. However, just as he walked to the entrance, he saw several brand new and luxurious black cars parked around the entrance. In the middle of the car, there were several men in black standing there. These people were all very tall, and it could be seen that these people were undoubtedly bodyguards. Shen Manting felt a little strange, but she didn't know anyone in this small village, and no one would think that she was hiding in a place like this. So these big spenders were definitely not looking for her. Shen Manting carried the groceries and slowly walked home with her head down, trying to minimize her presence. But the place they were blocking was very awkward. It happened to be the door of the small house she was renting. She felt for the key and walked forward, but before she could put it in, she heard the sound of the door opening behind her. Shen Manting felt the stares from all around her and felt a little scared. She immediately opened the door faster. Suddenly, an old lady's voice came from behind her. "Manting, so you're really here." The old lady's voice was very familiar. It was so familiar that Shen Manting would never forget it in this lifetime. Shen Manting paused slightly and froze on the spot. Old Mrs. Shen stepped forward and said, "Child." The old lady's petite and hunched body was right beside her. Shen Manting couldn't ignore her. She turned her head and smiled awkwardly. "Grandma," she called out. When old Mrs. Shen heard this, she immediately rebuked her and said loudly, "You still remember that I'm your grandma? Why did you suddenly leave? There was no news at all." Shen Manting was very embarrassed. She looked at the bodyguards around her. Just now, because he felt that he had to keep a low profile, he didn't dare to look at them. Now that he looked at them, he realized that he knew most of them. This was awkward. For a moment. Shen Manting felt like a fool. If he had known earlier, he would have just turned around and left. Even though his stomach had long been starving, Shen Manting rubbed her belly and forced a smile on her face. "Grandma, how did you know I was here?" "I don't know." When old Mrs. Shen saw her hand, she immediately noticed her slightly swollen belly. She said, "I only roughly calculated that you would be in this village. It was Luo An's men who helped me find out." Forget it. Shen Manting had always thought that old Mrs. Shen was quite mysterious. When she saw her just now, she wasn't too surprised. As if this was how it should be. For a moment, Shen Manting was speechless. Chapter 1639. Shen Manting finally reacted and immediately said, "I'm sorry, Grandma. I forgot. Come in, come in." Shen Manting opened the door and ushered old Mrs. Shen in. She said, "Our house is small. I lived alone, so I found a place to stay." Shen Manting turned around and found that other than the stool in front of the desk, the only other place to sit was on the bed. "Please sit here," Shen Manting said as she pulled the stool out. Old Mrs. Shen looked at Shen Manting's residence and furrowed her brows. It was a small single room, less than 10 square meters in size, with a bed that was about 1 meter in length. Opposite the bed was a small table, followed by a plastic stool. The walls were made of cement and were a little rough. There wasn't even a single tile on it. There was a small kitchen and toilet. Fortunately, the windows were large, and it looked like it was well lit. However, the strong and bright light made the shabbiness of the house, which was incompatible with them, even more obvious. It was clear at a glance. Old Mrs. Shen had never seen such a small house. Could such a house really be livable? However, old Mrs. Shen didn't say this out loud. Following his words, he sat on the only small stool. Shen Manting looked at it and said, "It might be a little hard. Do you want me to get you a pillow?" "There's no need, Manting." Old Mrs. Shen smiled kindly and turned to look at the bodyguard who followed her in. She said, "I'm talking to my granddaughter-in-law. Get out." The sudden address made Shen Manting's heart skip a beat. Granddaughter-in-law? What did she mean? The bodyguard nodded and quickly left, closing the door behind him. Shen Manting's stomach growled again. It was especially obvious in the quiet small room. Old Mrs. Shen chuckled when she heard it and said, "You must be hungry. Come, Grandma will make you something to eat. What did you buy?" Shen Manting hurriedly waved her hand and said, No, it's okay. Please sit here. I'm really hungry. Why don't you sit here, and I'll make something for you to eat. Is that okay?" Old Mrs. Shen nodded. "Okay. Thank you. I was going to make it anyway. Then can I visit?" Old Mrs. Shen asked. Shen Manting was a little embarrassed when she heard that. She lowered her head and said, "There's nothing to see. You'd better sit here for a while. I'll be done soon." After that he turned around and left. Shen Manting boiled it in water and began to process the fresh ingredients she had just bought. Old Mrs. Shun looked at her slender figure from behind. Her emotions were complicated. His heart ached, but he was also a little unhappy. Do you know who Luoan is marrying? Old Mrs. Shun suddenly asked. Shen Manting paused in the act of washing the vegetables. She quickly smiled and said, Guan Kui, right? I knew about it a long time ago. Do you know what Luoan has been up to recently? Shen Manting lowered her head and washed the vegetables. Her smile faded. Turning his head, he forced a smile and said, After the wedding, of course, they took their beloved bride on a honeymoon. Did they go to the Maldives or Hawaii? Or did he go to some other good place? As she spoke, Shen Manting suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Her eyes were slightly hot. She turned around and said, Help me give him my blessings. When old Mrs. Shen heard that, she knew she had no idea at all. She sighed and said, Guan Kui is dead. Dash. Chapter 1640. Shen Manting immediately straightened her back and turned her head to look. Guan Kui was dead? How could a girl like that, even if she had some mental problems over the years, just disappear like that under Shen Luoan's care? Seeing old Mrs. Shun's slightly sad expression, Shen Manting was surprised and laughed in disbelief. Grandma, are you joking? Manting, you should know that I'm not the kind of person who jokes. Old Mrs. Shun looked at Shen Manting and said, That girl died on the day of her wedding with Shen Luoan. She was poisoned to death. By who? Shen Manting vaguely felt that the illness was not as simple as it seemed. She asked, Why would she suddenly disappear? I don't know. The current verdict is that Shen Luoan committed the crime. Old Mrs. Shun sighed softly and said, But I know that Shen Luoan is not that kind of person. Shen Manting laughed softly when she heard that. She seemed to be muttering to herself, Who knows what kind of person he is in secret? Manting. Old Mrs. Shun's tone was somewhat meaningful as she said, I know that Shen Luoan has let you down, but he is now in prison and sentenced to 20 years. Shen Manting was washing the vegetables. When she heard that, her heart suddenly felt as if it had been stabbed. It caught her off guard, and it made her feel refreshed. 20 years. Shen Manting softly repeated those 3 words. She didn't know what to feel. She should have been happy, but at that moment, Shen Manting felt an indescribable mix of emotions. So Shen Luoan would also have such a day. Yes, 20 years. Old Mrs. Shen stood up and said, In 20 years, your child will have grown up. Even if something happens to Shen Luo, and in these 20 years, he won't be without an heir. Shen Manting was even more stunned. She stood rooted to the ground in disbelief. How did she know? Old Mrs. Shen walked forward and saw her hands in the water. She said, When he comes out, if the child can call him daddy, I think Shen Luoan will be happy. Shen Manting was a little embarrassed at being cut off. She laughed awkwardly and said, What are you talking about? What child? Old Mrs. Shun had expected her to deny it, so she ignored her and said, The child needs a better environment to grow up in. Come home with me, Manting. Grandma, I don't know where you heard that, but we don't have a child. It was a mistake between me and Shen Luoan. Shen Manting scooped up the washed vegetables and said, Such a ridiculous thing can't continue. It's better this way. Now that Shen Luoan is in prison, I can go back to my own life, Grandma. Manting, thank you for taking care of me all this while. Shen Manting interrupted the old man and said, Can you just pretend that you've never met me? Just pretend that we didn't know each other. You didn't bring me back to the Shen family, so I didn't know Shen Luoan. Manting, Grandma, I can't go back. Shen Luoan doesn't treat me as a human being at all. Shen Manting's voice was choked with sobs. Chapter 1641. That's because he forced me. Shen Manting growled. Everyone thinks he's a gentleman. He's filial smart and capable. He doesn't seem to have any problems at all. Shen Manting turned around and looked at old Mrs. Shun. She shouted, But do you know who he is secretly? Before old Mrs. Shun could finish, Shin Manting interrupted her. You don't know. You don't know anything. He's a beast, a devil. He doesn't even treat me as a human being. There must be some misunderstanding. Ha! Misunderstanding? Shin Manting laughed. There's no misunderstanding, Grandma. You should go back. I won't go with you. I'm begging you, okay? Old Mrs. Shin stepped forward and grabbed Shin Manting's hand. She said, Go back. At least don't let the child become an illegitimate child. The child is innocent. You've misunderstood. I don't have a child. Shin Manting waved her hand away. I don't know who you heard it from, but it's impossible for me to give birth to Shin Luoan's child. That bastard is dirty. Old Mrs. Shun didn't expect Shin Manting to be so ruthless. His expression changed, and he whispered, Are you really not going to give face to Grandma? My legs are not good, and my body is getting worse day by day. I've been taking medicine all this time. You know Ha! Old Mrs. Shun's face suddenly turned purple. She clutched her chest and slowly squatted down. Shin Manting was shocked. She quickly held her and said, Grandma. Old Mrs. Shun's expression was already very ugly. At that moment, she held Shin Manting's hands tightly and gasped violently. Shin Manting's expression also changed dramatically. She shouted, Help! Help! The bodyguard who was guarding outside rushed in. After seeing old Mrs. Shun's appearance, he immediately became vigilant. He came forward and picked up the thin little old lady. He said, Let me. However, old Mrs. Shun held Shin Manting's hands tightly. She said in a broken voice, You, Manting, Manting. When the bodyguard saw this, he frowned and said, Miss, please come with us. The old lady's condition is not very optimistic, but we can't leave with you like this. Shin Manting panicked when she heard that. She reached out and tried to pull her hand away, but the little old lady's grip was very strong. Manting. It was as if old Mrs. Shun had made up her mind to drag her away. She did not loosen her grip at all. Miss, please come with us. As he spoke, he didn't care whether Shin Manting agreed or not. He shouted, Someone come in and help. The old lady was sent to the hospital. After the emergency treatment, she was found to be fine. Shin Manting immediately realized that she had been deceived by the old lady. At the same time, he was furious and wanted to leave, but he was already surrounded by such a group of bodyguards, and it was difficult for him to resist. Report, the old lady asked us to go back. All right, let's go back. When Shin Manting heard that, she immediately stood up and said, Since you're going back, there's nothing else for me to do. I'll take my leave first. However, the bodyguards quickly surrounded her and said, Miss, I'm sorry. The old lady didn't order you to leave. Please come with us. Chapter 1642. The bodyguards looked at each other and seemed to have made a final decision. The leader said, I'm sorry, Mississippi. Please come with us. No. Shin Manting looked at them and suddenly screamed, Help! Kidnap! There were many doctors and nurses coming and going. After hearing the noise, they quickly looked over. The bodyguards were all shocked. They turned around and immediately covered Shin Manting's mouth. Shin Manting struggled violently, but she felt a pain in her lower abdomen. She frowned and her face suddenly turned pale. Shin Manting gradually stopped struggling, but her breathing became more rapid. The bodyguards suddenly felt that something was wrong and immediately let go. Shin Manting collapsed and hugged her stomach in pain. One of the doctors ran over and asked, What's going on? But soon he saw Shin Manting squatting on the ground with a painful look on her face. He said sternly, Get out of the way. Let me take a look. The bodyguards didn't want to hurt Shin Manting, so they quickly moved aside. Shin Manting's stomach was really painful. Her face was pale, and her forehead was covered with sweat. She was carried to the hospital bed. The doctor examined her and asked, Where does it hurt? Stomach. Baby. Shin Manting was in so much pain that it was difficult for her to speak. She grabbed the doctor's white coat with a pale face and said, I haven't eaten all day. Is this the reason? The doctor's expression immediately turned serious and said, How can you not eat all day when you're pregnant? Send her to the obstetrics department. The news that Shin Manting was pregnant soon reached old Mrs. Shun's ears. Especially when he heard that it was very likely that she had not eaten for a whole day. He immediately blamed himself in his heart. When they arrived at Shin Manting's ward, she was sleeping comfortably. She seemed to be extremely vigilant. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and her whole body was curled up like a newborn baby. Her hands were wrapped around her stomach, and her face was pale. She had changed into a patient's gown, and was now on an intravenous drip. She didn't seem to be in good condition. Old Mrs. Shun walked forward, and was very distressed. This child had been an orphan since she was young. It wasn't easy for her to live a good life, but she met her grandson. Although old Mrs. Shun didn't know what had happened between them, she could tell that Shin Manting was very repulsed by Shin Luoan. In fact, it could even be said that he hated them. It seemed that old Mrs. Shun's entrance had disturbed the person who was sleeping soundly. Shin Manting curled up on the bed and opened her eyes. Shin Manting froze when she saw old Mrs. Shun. Then he looked around. It was a vast expanse of whiteness. The smell of the potion wafted over, and the back of his hand stung slightly. He was at the hospital. How long had it been? No matter how uncomfortable she was, she did not dare to come to the hospital. In her current situation, she could not afford the expensive medical fees of the hospital. Old Mrs. Shun sighed and said, "Manting, I'm sorry. I let you down." "Thank you," Shin Manting suddenly said. "Thank you for remembering me and being willing to look for me. I will remember your great kindness, but I really can't go back with you." "Why?" Old Mrs. Shun was indignant. "Am I not good enough to you?" Chapter 1643. Shin Manting's pale smile was tinged with desolation. She said, "You can call me greedy, but I can't go back with you." It wasn't her home to begin with. She had to pay a price for everything she had. If that was the case, then the price would be too heavy. She didn't want it anymore. Everything she had dreamed of had vanished when Shin Luo and imprisoned her and treated her as a sex slave. She used to think that she was a princess, but later she found out that she was just a clown for others to entertain. Manting, old Mrs. Shin was heartbroken. Shin Luoan is in jail now. Hasn't your hatred for him subsided? Why are you venting your anger on me? Grandma, I didn't. Shin Manting's smile faded slightly. Have you forgotten? My name wasn't Shin Manting. Old Mrs. Shun was shocked. Did she want to sever ties with their family? What do you mean? This name is your granddaughter's name. This surname is also your granddaughter's surname. I just adopted it for a few years, Grandma. Shin Manting smiled faintly. My original name was Zhang Meifang. I remember it, Grandma. Shin Manting. Thank you for your name, but you should call me Meifang from now on. The Shin Manting in your household register will be considered dead. There will be no Shin Manting in the future. No. Old Mrs. Shun was very determined. Impossible. You can forget about it. I know what you want. Shin Manting smiled weakly. Don't you want this child? I can give birth to it and give it to you. But after I give it to you, we'll part ways. The Shun family. The Shun family. To anyone in the imperial capital, these two words probably signified a new power and nobility. But to her, it was a nightmare that had haunted her for a long time. It was time to wake up from such a nightmare. Old Mrs. Shun's face turned green and purple. She said, I don't just want a great-grandson. I want a granddaughter-in-law. Shin Luoan is already in prison. Are you asking me to go back and be a widow? Shin Manting laughed. I thought Shin Luo and was the only selfish one in the Shin family. Turns out it's hereditary. Old Mrs. Shin was furious. She couldn't take it anymore and yelled, Shin Manting. Zhang Meifang, Grandma. Old Mrs. Shin was truly enraged this time. She had never seen Shin Manting so stubborn before. He was so stubborn that even she didn't know how to persuade him. He had no choice but to use his trump card. This child of yours, be it a boy or a girl, is my great-grandson. I have 2 villas in the capital. They are very big, and the market price is at least 50 million. 2 villas would be 100 million, and the price will continue to rise. You know the houses in the capital, so I'll leave these 2 villas to you, okay? Shin Manting sneered. In the beginning, He was still trying to move his emotions and reason with her. Was he trying to tempt her with such a large sum of money? You can give it to Shen Luo'an's child. Of course. When old Mrs. Shen heard that Shen Manting had finally relented, she was overjoyed and said, "The child is yours." Shen Manting laughed. "If I give birth to it, I can give it to you. I can't afford to raise it anyway. But how do you know that it's Shen Luo'an's child?" Dash. Chapter 1644. Old Mrs. Shen hadn't expected Shen Manting to say that. She was stunned for a moment, but quickly reacted and said, "This child must belong to the Shen family. It can't be wrong. Manting, you can fool me, but you can't fool the heavens." Shen Manting felt her hair stand on end. After spending so much time with old Mrs. Shen Manting believed in it. It was just like how the old lady couldn't accept Yi Yuyu as her granddaughter-in-law. From the moment Yi Yuyu married into the Shen family, old Mrs. Shen began to reject her. No matter how big or small it was, as long as she could cause trouble for Yi Yuyu, old Mrs. Shen would be the first to rush forward. She was adamant that Yi Yuyu wasn't fated to be their daughter-in-law. She was fated to marry twice. In the end, it turned out to be true. Yi Yuyu was now with Li Jinnan. They were a couple, and it wasn't long before they got married. Now that she heard old Mrs. Shen's words, she lost the courage to deny it. "Manting, what do I have to do for you to go back with me? Tell me. I'll do it for you no matter what. As long as you're willing to go back, I'm begging you." Her words were serious, but Shen Manting knew the old lady well. What she said was only an expedient measure. No one knew what the specifics would be. "Grandma, just give up. I'm grateful for your high regard. Thank you for coming to such a place to look for me. But I won't go back no matter what. Manting, that place doesn't belong to me. Please go back." Old Mrs. Shen was disappointed to see that Shen Manting was determined not to go back. She stood by her side, unwilling to leave. She stared at Shen Manting for a long time before sighing and saying, "Shen Luo'an owes you." The verdict of the trial was out. Because of the recording, no matter how capable Guan Yanhong was, he couldn't reverse the situation. Shen Luo'an was acquitted in court, and the audience cheered. Mrs. Shen cried on the spot and hugged her husband excitedly. She shouted, "He's finally out! He's finally out!" Shen Jilia was also silently relieved. His eyes were fixed on the joyful Shen Luo'an in the dock. Following that, his gaze landed on Yi Yuyu and Li Jinnan, who were in the row in front of him. He sincerely said, "Thank you both." When Yi Yuyu heard Shen Jilia's question, she turned her head to look at him. This familiar face had helped Shen Luo'an pay off many of his debts when she was helpless. She smiled sweetly at Shen Jilia and replied, "You don't have to be so polite." At the same time, Mrs. Shen turned around and said to Yi Yuyu, thank you so much for this. I'm really grateful to you. If it weren't for you, Shen Luo'an would have to stay in there for 20 years. He's already in his 30s, and he still doesn't have a child. If he were to come out in 20 years, would anyone still be willing to marry him? The more Mrs. Shen thought about it, the more frightened she became. Her gratitude toward Yi Yuyu grew. Yi Yuyu suddenly found it funny. She couldn't help but think of Yi Tian. Shen Luo'an was not Mrs. Shen's child, but Mrs. Shen treated Shen Luo'an as her own. Chapter 1645. Yi Yuyu's emotions became even more complicated, but she was no longer sad. Looking at Mrs. Shen, Yi Yuyu smiled and said, "If it weren't for Shen Luo'an, I would be the one in there now. I should be the one thanking Shen Luo'an." As she spoke, Li Jinnan stood up. His expression was calm as he looked at Yi Yuyu and said, "Let's go. It's time to return to Kingstown." "All right." Yi Yuyu stood up at the same time. She smiled at her former family members and said, "This is something I should do. Shen Luo'an wasn't a criminal to begin with, but he ended up in jail because he took the blame for me. Now, I'll take it that I've returned Shen Luo'an's favor. I don't think we need to meet again in the future. Yuyu, goodbye." Yi Yuyu smiled. Li Jinan was already holding her hand as she turned around. Don't be so sure. No one can say for sure what will happen in the future, right? Shen Julia looked at Yi Yuyu's back and said, I still have to thank you, Yuyu. Yi Yuyu's footsteps paused, but she didn't turn around. Finally, under their gazes, she leaned on Li Jinan and slowly walked out of their sight. Shen Julia looked at Yi Yuyu's back and sighed. He quickly stood up and walked toward Shen Luoan. Shen Luo, and had already been released from his shackles. He had never felt so close to his younger brother before. He walked forward and gave him a big hug. Shen Julia patted Shen Julia's back and said, You're finally out. It's all thanks to Yuyu. The smile on Shen Luoan's face gradually faded. He looked at Shen Julia and asked, Where is she? She left with Li Jinan. Shen Julia replied honestly. Li Jinan treats her very well. And Yi Yuyu is already pregnant. After this incident, don't go looking for her again. Shen Julia replied honestly. Shen Julia had added that sentence himself. It was clear that Yi Yuyu's words had conveyed the same meaning. Shen Luoan felt conflicted. When he heard that, he lowered his head in defeat and said with a bitter smile, She still hates me. That's right. All these years, I didn't trust her. If it were me, I probably wouldn't forgive someone like me. Good that you know. Shen Julia didn't sympathize with him at all. He patted him on the back and said, Grandma found Manting. Shen Luoan stiffened and asked, How is she now? She is also pregnant. Shen Julia felt that the world was very mysterious. She didn't know many girls who were sick, but the few she knew all had good news. Yi Yu Lily, Shen Manting Shen Luoan felt conflicted. He lowered his head slightly and smiled bitterly. She's pregnant. I've let her down. Good that you know. Shen Julia's words were still the same. He snapped. Why don't you count how many flowers you've ruined? Shen Luoan sighed but said nothing. When Shen Julia saw his reaction, he didn't continue to criticize him. He patted him on the shoulder and said, Go on, get changed and then go home. Actually, I've thought a lot during this period of time. Shen Luoan said, I'm sorry, but the only one I can make it up to now is Shen Manting. You want to marry her? Chapter 1646. When he heard Shen Luoan's firm answer, Shen Julia laughed and said, That depends on whether she's willing to marry you. Grandma will bring her back. Hee, you make it sound so easy. Shen Julia's tone was full of disdain as he said, Now Sister Manting doesn't want to come back at all. Grandmother even promised to give her all her properties, but she insists on not coming back. Although I don't know what you've done to her, I can tell that it's definitely not something good. Otherwise, she wouldn't have left in the first place and refused to come back even now. Where are they now? In the hospital. Yi Yuyu and Li Jinan went straight to the hospital. They had already made an appointment for a prenatal checkup. After the checkup, the doctor informed them that the child was perfectly healthy. Soon, they reached home, and the two of them fell asleep in each other's arms. Time always passed quickly when one was asleep, so the two of them went to the Rong residence after waking up. Li Jianxian was already very used to the Rong family, and he got along very well with Rong Xian and Rong Haiyue. It was already very late when he left the Rong residence. At approximately 10 p.m., Yi Yu received a call from Yi Tian. Yi Tian's intentions were clear. She didn't bother with pleasantries. As soon as the call connected, she got straight to the point. Now that Shen Luoan has been released, when will your boyfriend give me the $1 million he promised me? It's best to arrange a time tomorrow to trade face to face. Otherwise, I'll have to make a trip when you guys go back to Connecticut. Yi Yu turned on the speaker. Li Jinan was sitting on the sofa reading, so he heard everything clearly. Yi Yu instinctively glanced at him. In the depths of his pitch-black eyes, a hint of surprise flashed across them. He reached out his hand, and she quickly handed the phone over to him. Li Jinan seemed to have been prepared for that. He calmly replied, Sure. Let's have lunch together tomorrow. All right. I know a restaurant that's pretty good. I'll send you the address later. No need, I've already booked a place. See you tomorrow at noon at the World Trade Center. Yi Tian's heart leaped with joy. She complimented him. I knew you'd be a good person. See you tomorrow at noon. When he heard that, he didn't reply. He handed the phone back to Yu. She quickly bade farewell to the person on the other end of the line. She looked at Li Jinan and asked, "When did you make the reservation? Besides, how did you know she would look for us?" "I don't know," Li Jinan said casually. He closed the book in his hand. "But now I know. She just wants money. That's simple." As Li Jinan spoke, there was a faint smile on his face. Yu curiously leaned over and whispered, "What do you want to do?" "Nothing. Let's go take a shower. Together. You go first." When Yu heard that, her eyes turned into crescents as she wrapped her arms around his waist and said, "Together." Li Jinan lowered his head and gently nibbled on the tip of her nose as he said, "No, you have to go by yourself. Be careful not to slip." "I'm afraid. What if I slip and fall?" Yiyu's fingers wandered around his waist. "That wouldn't be good." Li Jinan turned his head away. "That won't happen. I put a non-slip mat in the bathroom." Yiyu was speechless. From the looks of it, Li Jinan had come prepared. She planted a kiss on his lips and said, "I'm going. Help me warm the bed." Dash. Chapter 1647. What a vixen! Li Jinan felt that life was very difficult, especially with a wife like her. It was already so difficult. She had only been pregnant for a month. What was she going to do in the future? When Yiyu saw Li Jinan's indescribable expression, she was secretly pleased. She quickly entered the bathroom and took a fragrant shower. When she came out, she found Li Jinan busy with his computer. Because it was summer, Yiyu was only wearing a tank top and a short skirt. She held a towel in her hand and rubbed her hair dry as she leaned over. After the shower, her body was not only fragrant but also warm. Li Jinan felt a faint wave of heat hit him in the face. He immediately looked at her. When he saw her dressed like that, the first thought that popped into his mind was, "She's not wearing anything underneath." With that thought in mind, his emotions, which he had finally managed to calm down, were once again fired up with excitement. Damn it! That vixen! When she gives birth, I'm going to teach her a lesson. But now, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. He put the computer aside and didn't dare to say a word. He was afraid that she would take the opportunity to speak. He quickly slipped into the bathroom. Yiyu's lips curled up. She felt a sense of satisfaction at being in control of her man. Hee. No wonder those tigresses like to control their men so much. It turns out that it's so fun. I'm afraid that I won't be able to escape from this man in the future. Humph. Yiyu put down the towel in her hand. Her eyes quickly landed on the computer in front of her. The computer screen was lit up. On it was a chat between Li Jinan and Lawyer Yi. Both of them were men, so the way they spoke was more official. "Lawyer Yi, don't worry. I'll definitely resolve the matter satisfactorily." Li 3. "Thank you." Handshake. "Lawyer Yi. You're too kind." Yi. She scrolled up the records and read them line by line. The more she read, the more shocked she became. That's what Li Jinan had in mind. Yi Tian arrived very early. When she arrived, Yi and Li Jinan weren't there yet. However, when they entered the private room they were talking about, there were already people waiting inside. When Lawyer Yi saw Yi Tian, she quickly stood up with a smile and said, "Madam Yi, how are you? I'm Mr. Li Jinan's lawyer." As he spoke, he handed over his name card. Naturally, Yi Tian recognized him. When Yi had been imprisoned, this lawyer had put in a lot of effort. "Hello, I'm Yi's mother. Are they here yet?" Lawyer Yi nodded and said, "Mr. Li, there's a traffic jam on the road. Let's take a seat first." Yi Tian nodded her head. In a flash, he sat on the main seat. The way he looked at Lawyer Yi was a little condescending. Lawyer Yi did not mind at all. She turned around and took out a document. Lawyer Yi placed it in front of Yi Tian and said, "Madam Yi, we can first discuss the compensation for Mr. Li's car." Yi Tian was slightly taken aback. Chapter 1648. This was the first time Lawyer Yi had interacted with Yi Tian. He had heard from Li Jinnan that she could be a difficult woman to deal with. However, this was the first time he had experienced the extent of her difficulty. When Lawyer Yi heard that, the smile on his face remained as formal as ever. He said, "Madam Yi, according to the law, your daughter and Mr. Li did not get their marriage notarized. Therefore, the relationship that you are talking about does not exist." "What a joke," Yi Tian said with disdain. "Didn't you see how much that rascal loves my daughter? It's only a matter of time before they get married. When that happens, won't their belongings be mine? Is that what Li Jinnan told you to tell me?" As Yi Tian spoke, she had already come to a conclusion. She said, "That rascal won't do. He's so petty. It's just a car. And it's not an expensive one. With a mother-in-law like that, what good days will he have in the future?" The smile on Lawyer Ye's face could no longer be maintained. Having been in this profession for so many years, he had dealt with all kinds of matters. However, it was rare to see a woman who could twist words and twist logic like this. After calming himself down, Lawyer Yi explained, "You might have misunderstood. Other than the fact that they didn't get married, there's another fact that I think you need to know." Yi Tian grew impatient. She waved her hand and said, "Spit it out. This car doesn't belong to Mr. Li Jinnan. It belongs to his older brother Li Beixing." "So what?" Yi Tian asked nonchalantly. "In other words, Mr. Li Jinnan still has to compensate his older brother for this business car that costs $1.8 million. However, you are the one responsible for this incident. Therefore, you should be the one to pay for it." "Tui, pay for it, my foot." Yi Tian was furious. She shouted, "I've already discussed it with Li Jinnan. He will pay for it. Furthermore, he has to pay me another $1 million. I'm here today to collect the money. Don't try to fool me. When that bastard Li Jinnan shows up, you'll know." When Lawyer Yi heard that, he said, "Madam Yi, according to Mr. Li's statement, he does indeed have to pay you $1 million. It's good that you know." "Shut up, you're so annoying." Lawyer Yi was a little angry from being yelled at, but he was still patient and said, "But this car is already on the verge of being scrapped. The paint that you splashed not only damaged the exterior of the car, but it also smashed the windows and damaged all the seats inside. The market price of the car is $1.8 million, and the repair fee is a total of $110. This does not include the maintenance and repair services, so you'd better shut up. Li Jinnan already promised me. I still have the recording here." Yi Tian took out the voice recorder in her hand and played the recording. His voice wasn't soft, so Lawyer Yi could hear him loud and clear. "I, Li Jinnan, have agreed to pay Madame Yi Tian the betrothal gift for my marriage to her daughter, Yi Yuyu, a total of $1 million. If I break my promise, may I be struck by lightning." These words carried a lot of weight. Lawyer Yi nodded and said, "So it's the betrothal gift for Miss Yi. $1 million. What a huge sum." "That's true." Yi Tian was clearly pleased with herself. "He's my son-in-law." Chapter 1649. That kind reminder rendered Yi Tian speechless for a moment. As if to prove her point, Yi Tian pressed the play button on the recording again. After listening to it again, she realized that Li Jinnan hadn't mentioned a single word about the car. Before Yi Tian could react, someone pushed the door open. Yi Yuyu and Li Jinnan were brought in by a waiter, who quickly left. When Yi Tian saw Li Jinnan, she immediately rushed forward and raised the recording pen. In a loud voice she asked, "Li Jinnan, what's the meaning of this?" Li Jinnan had just walked in. Faced with Yi Tian's questioning, it was obvious that this woman had hit a wall with Lawyer Yi. However, he pretended to be confused and asked in surprise, "What do you mean?" Yi Tian immediately played the recording. When Li Jinnan heard it, he raised his eyebrows and retorted, "That's what I said. Is there a problem?" Seeing that Li Jinnan was obviously playing dumb, Yi Tian's anger flared up and she shouted, "You didn't mention anything about the car in that recording at all." "Yeah, I didn't." Li Jinnan's expression was calm and composed, which made Yi Tian even angrier. She roared, Didn't we agree that I wouldn't have to compensate for the car, and that I would have to pay $1 million as a betrothal gift? You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Li Jinnan looked even more surprised and replied, When did I say that? I don't even know myself. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Yuyu and asked, Did I say that? Yi Yuyu shook her head and replied with certainty, No. Yi Tian flew into a rage. Yi Yuyu, who exactly is your mother? Why are you siding with an outsider? I'm sorry, Madam Yi, but my mother isn't here. Yi Yuyu's eyes turned into crescents. What's wrong? Now that you're the one paying up, you're talking like that? Yi Tian's face contorted in anger. She raised her hand and prepared to slap him. Before the slap could land, it was stopped in its tracks by a large hand. Li Jinnan looked at her coldly. He immediately grabbed her hand and gave it a shove. Hitting a pregnant woman is not a small matter, Madam Yi. If you really hit a pregnant woman, then your car compensation will be that simple. Lawyer Yi interrupted and said, I did a rough calculation. Because you have the recording as proof, Mr. Li definitely got the 1 million yuan. However, after deducting the repair fee for Mr. Li Beixing's car, you still have to pay 100,000 yuan. In other words, not only would she not get a single cent of the 1 million yuan, but she would also have to fork out 100,000 yuan? What a joke! Yi Tian's expression was ugly. She flung the voice recorder aside and roared, Li Jinnan, you bastard! You dare to lie to me? You have to give me that 1 million yuan today, or I'll die in front of you. Madam Yi, you're threatening my client. You'll have to compensate for emotional distress, Lawyer Yi said. Yi Tian roared, Shut up. There's no such thing. You're extorting us. No, Madam Yi. This is the bill that the 4S shop sent me. It's 11 yuan in total. I'll round it up to 1 million yuan. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.